So hey guys. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Ano x Kaguya x Kushina. So let's start the series. The night Konoha burned with celebration was the night the universe held its breath. Minato Namake's hands, steady through 3 wars, trembled as he pressed them against the seal. The Nine Tails raged against its cage, and somewhere behind him, the village he had sworn to protect was becoming ash and memory. But none of that mattered now. Not the war. Not the village. Not even the fox whose hatred could level mountains. There was only the boy. He's beautiful, Kushina whispered, and her voice was already thin, already fading. Blood matted her red hair to her face, but her eyes, those fierce, laughing eyes that had once made Minato believe he could do anything, were fixed entirely on the small, wrinkled creature in her arms. He has your stubborn forehead. Minato laughed. It came out broken. He has your everything else. Naruto. They had chosen the name weeks ago, sitting on their porch while the village hummed below them, peaceful and unaware. Whirlpool. A name to carry Kushina's homeland forward. A name that meant something, that moved, that changed, that could never be stopped. Now Minato's hands were covered in seals he had designed specifically for this moment. The Reaper Death Seal. The 8 trigram seal. A dozen contingency arrays he had scribbled in his journals during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come. He had planned for everything. He had not planned for his hands to shake. The seal will hold him, Minato said, and he was not sure if he was reassuring Kushina or himself. The fox will be contained. He'll. Naruto. Kushina's voice cut through his preparations like a blade through silk. His name is Naruto. He's not a container, Minato. He's our son. The words landed somewhere in his chest, sharp and warm. Minato closed his eyes for a single breath. When he opened them, the trembling in his hands had stopped. I know. He knelt beside her, pressed his forehead to hers, and for one perfect moment, they were not the 4th Hokage and the last Uzumaki. They were just 2 people who had found something precious, something worth dying for. I know. The seal was almost complete. Minato could feel the Reaper's presence looming behind him, ancient and hungry. The price was already taken, his soul, Kushina's life, everything they were and might have been. A fair exchange, he thought, for the small miracle breathing softly against Kushina's chest. But the universe had other plans. It began as a sound no one heard. Not Minato, whose senses had been honed through thousands of battles. Not Kushina, whose Uzumaki perception ran deeper than any sensors. Not even Kurama, whose ancient awareness had witnessed the birth and death of stars. The sound was a frequency beneath existence itself, a vibration in the space between moments. And in that space, something stirred. Above the mortal realm, beyond the dimensional layers the Otsutsuki had mapped and claimed, there existed a place that no being of chakra had ever touched. It was not a realm of gods. Gods were petty things, hungry for worship and sacrifice. This was something older. Something that had watched the first atom split and the first consciousness flicker into being. And it was watching now. Here, Abigail thought, and her voice was the collision of galaxies, the whisper of nebulae being born. Here at last. She had seen this moment approaching for eons. Not as prophecy, she did not deal in such crude determinism, but as potential. A convergence. The boy with the demon inside him. The father who would die. The mother who would fade. The cycle of pain that had repeated itself across 1,000 worlds, 1,000,000 timelines. She could let it happen. She had let it happen before, so many times that the weight of it had become a gravity she could barely escape. But something was different now. Something had shifted. The boy's soul blazed with something she had not seen in longer than she could calculate. Not just the fox's chakra, though that burned bright enough. Not just the Uzumaki vitality, though that pulsed with its own fierce light. No, this was something else. Something that had no name in any language spoken by mortal lips. Potential, she thought. True potential. The kind that reshapes what is possible. The Reaper was already reaching for Minato's soul. The seal was spinning into place. In moments, the boy would be alone, burdened with a monster, orphaned by a war he would never remember. Abigail made her choice. Minato felt it first, a pressure in the air, a stillness that had nothing to do with the battle raging outside. The Reaper's presence flickered, and for the first time since he had summoned it, the death god hesitated. What? Minato started, but the word died in his throat. The world had stopped. Not slowed. Not paused. Stopped. The flames outside the barrier hung frozen, orange and red sculptures of destruction. Kushina's hair, matted and wild, was suspended in the air as if time itself had forgotten to move it. Even the Nine Tails, that ancient force of chaos and hatred, had gone silent within its cage. Only Minato could move. Only Minato could see. And what he saw made the fourth Hokage, the man they called the Yellow Flash, forget how to breathe. The space before him was folding. Not breaking, folding, like paper being shaped by hands too vast to comprehend. The laws of physics that Minato had built his entire career on understanding were being rewritten in real time, and at the center of it all was his son. Naruto was crying. The sound should have been impossible in a frozen world, but it reached Minato's ears clear and sharp, a baby's wail of confusion and cold and hunger. And the light that gathered around him seemed to respond to that cry, bending toward it, wrapping around the small, fragile form like a blanket woven from starlight. No! Minato breathed. He tried to move, tried to reach for his son, but something held him in place. Not force, nothing so crude. It was simply that the universe had decided that, for this moment, Minato Namikaze would stand exactly where he was and watch. The light coalesced. Took form. And then Abigail was there. She was not what Minato expected. No throne of bones, no crown of fire, no terrifying visage of judgment. She looked, impossibly, like a woman, if a woman could be made of things that had no business existing in a physical world. Her hair moved like nebulae, her skin held the faint luminescence of distant stars, and her eyes contained the patient, terrifying wisdom of something that had watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. But when she looked at Naruto, her expression was soft, almost sad. "Hello, little one," she said, and her voice was the sound of wind through ancient forests, of water finding its way through stone. "You have no idea what they're asking of you, do you?" Minato found his voice. "What are you?" The being, Abigail, though he did not know her name yet, turned her gaze to him, and Minato felt the weight of her attention like a physical thing. Not hostile. Not curious. Simply aware. "I am what remains when gods forget why they were created," she said. "I am the space between stars, the silence between heartbeats, the potential that exists in every choice not yet made. I am the one who watches when there is no one left to remember." She looked back at Naruto, who had stopped crying. The baby's eyes, still that unfocused blue of the newborn, seemed to fix on something Minato could not see. "Your son is extraordinary," Abigail continued. "Not because of what you have given him. Not because of the fox sealed within his soul. He is extraordinary because of what he chooses to become. I have seen 1,000 paths before him, 1,000,000 futures. In most, he breaks. In some, he becomes something terrible. In a handful, he becomes something beautiful." She paused, and when she spoke again, there was something in her voice that Minato had not expected to hear from a being of her apparent power. Grief. "But in all of them, he is alone. The weight you are placing on his shoulders, Minato Namikaze, it is too much for one soul to carry. And yet you carry it yourselves. You and Kushina. You carried the weight of your village, your people, your duty. And you asked your son to carry the rest." Minato's hands clenched at his sides. "I would never." "You would." Abigail's voice was gentle, but there was no mercy in it. "Because you have no choice. The seal requires a sacrifice. The fox must be contained. Your village will need a symbol, a scapegoat, a weapon. You know this. You have planned for this. And your son will pay the price for your necessity." Kushina's frozen form lay between them, her hand still resting on Naruto's head. Minato looked at her, at the seal on her stomach, at the blood that had stopped mid-flow. "What are you offering?" he asked, and his voice cracked on the last word. Abigail smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "I am offering nothing. I am intervening. There is a difference." She raised her hand, and the light around Naruto intensified. Minato lunged forward, instinct overriding terror, but he found himself frozen again, not by force, but by the sudden, overwhelming understanding that what was happening was not destruction. It was creation. "I grant this child 3 gifts," Abigail said, and her voice resonated through dimensions Minato had never known existed. "First, immortality of a kind. His body will not age beyond its prime. His soul will not be claimed by death unless he chooses to release it. The fox will not take him, no matter how it rages. He will endure." The light wrapped around Naruto's chest, sinking into his skin like water into sand. "Second, potential. I do not give power freely, power that is given is power that corrupts. But I open doors that would otherwise remain closed. The shadows will answer him. The eyes of the gods will be his to awaken. He will walk paths that no shinobi has walked before. But each step will cost him. Each gift will demand its price. He will not be made strong. He will become strong, or he will fail." The light moved to Naruto's eyes, and for a moment, Minato saw something looking out from behind them, something ancient and vast and patient. Third, protection. The threads of fate that would bind him, I sever. The prophecies that would use him, I break. He will make his own choices. He will forge his own destiny. No god, no demon, no destiny will claim him without his consent. The light faded. The world was still frozen, still silent, but something fundamental had changed. Minato could feel it in the air, in the weight of his own soul, in the way his son's breathing had become different, deeper, more present. What are you? Minato asked again, and this time the question was different. This time he was asking not for a name, but for a reason. Abigail looked at him, and for a moment she seemed almost human, almost tired. I am the one who watches children suffer, she said quietly. And I have watched for so long. So very long. Perhaps too long. But this child has the capacity to be something I have not seen since the first stars burned out. Something that remembers what it means to choose love over power, connection over isolation, humanity over divinity. She looked down at Naruto, and her hand, translucent, filled with captured starlight, hovered over his forehead without quite touching. Be careful, little one, she whispered. The gifts I have given you will save you. But they will also tempt you. You will have the power to become anything. The hardest thing you will ever do is choose to remain human. She straightened, and her gaze returned to Minato. He will need anchors. People who see him as a child, not a weapon. People who love him without condition. You have given him your souls, your sacrifice, your duty. But you have also given him something more precious, though you do not know it yet. His parents, Minato said. Abigail nodded slowly. You will not raise him. The seal requires your souls, and the fox's prison will consume your presence in his waking mind. But I have made arrangements. When his mind turns inward, when he seeks the demon sealed within him, he will find more than a monster. He will find you. Both of you. Not as ghosts, not as echoes, but as guides. As parents. As the love that chose to die for him, and will choose to live for him still. Minato's vision blurred. He had accepted his death. He had made peace with it, as much as any man could. But to know that some part of him would remain, would see his son grow, would have the chance to be a father. How? He managed. Abigail's smile was sad. I have broken the laws of existence to give your son a chance at something more than suffering. Making two souls linger where they should not is a small thing, compared to that. The Reaper will take the fox's chakra, as you intended. But your souls will remain, bound to the seal, bound to your son. You will not age. You will not change. But you will be there. She looked between them, Minato, frozen in his resolve, and Kushina, suspended in her final moment of life. You have 1 minute, Abigail said. When time resumes, the seal will complete. The Reaper will take what it was promised. You will not have long to say goodbye. She stepped back, and time lurched. Not resumed, the flames were still frozen, the destruction still paused, but moved enough for Kushina to stir, to blink, to focus on Minato's face with confusion and fear. Minato? What? He was beside her in an instant, his arms around her, his forehead pressed to hers. Listen to me. There's no time. Our son, Naruto, he's been given something. A chance. We can't explain it, but we'll be there. With him. Inside the seal. We'll watch him grow. Kushina's eyes widened. The Reaper Death Seal. Modified. Changed. I don't understand it, but we'll be there. Not dead. Not alive. But present. We'll see our son become a man. Kushina's breath caught. Her hand found Naruto's face, tracing his features with fingers that were already growing cold. He's so small, she whispered. So small to carry so much. He won't carry it alone, Minato said. We'll be there. And whatever that being gave him, whatever power she unlocked, he'll have us. To guide him. To love him. To remind him what he's fighting for. Kushina laughed, and it was wet and broken and beautiful. You always find a way, don't you? Even when you're supposed to die, you find a way to stay. I learned from the best, Minato said, and he kissed her, and for one perfect moment, they were not dying. They were not sacrificing. They were simply two people who loved each other, holding their son, watching the world pause to give them one last gift. Naruto stirred in Kushina's arms. His eyes opened, those impossibly blue eyes, so like his father's, so unlike anything either of them had ever seen, and he looked up at them. And he smiled. Not the reflexive smile of a newborn. Not the gasping, uncoordinated expression of an infant discovering its face. Something in that smile was deliberate. Aware. Grateful. Goodbye. Kushina whispered, and her voice was steady now, resolved. Be brave, little whirlpool. Be kind. And when the world tells you to be something else, When it tells you to be a weapon, a monster, a god, remember that you are our son. And we love you. We will always love you. Minato pressed his hand to Naruto's chest, over the seal he had designed, over the gifts Abigail had given. We'll be watching, he promised. We'll be waiting. And when you're ready to find us, we'll be there. Time resumed. The flames roared. The nine tails screamed. The Reaper's hand plunged through Minato's chest, through Kushina's, through the barrier of flesh and chakra and will that separated the living from the dead. But in the center of it all, wrapped in blankets and held in arms that were already fading, Naruto Uzumaki slept on. And in the darkness of the seal that would become his prison, his sanctuary, his inheritance, two souls settled into place like stars finding their constellations. Waiting. Watching. Loving. The morning after the Nine-Tails attack, the Third Hokage stood in the ruins of what had once been a hospital and tried to make sense of the impossible. The infant in his arms weighed almost nothing. He had held children before, his own, his students, the countless orphans of 3 wars, but this one felt different. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just present. As if the space he occupied was somehow more real than the space around him. Lord Third. An ANBU materialized at his side, voice filtered through a mask that could not quite hide the exhaustion. The council is requesting your presence. They're asking about. I know what they're asking about. Hiruzen's voice was old. Older than it had been yesterday, older than it had any right to be. Tell them I will attend to the village first. The child second. Their questions third. The ANBU hesitated. Lord Third, the child is. The child is the 4th Hokage's dying wish, Hiruzen said quietly. The child is Kushina Uzumaki's last gift to this village. The child is a citizen of Konoha, and he will be treated as such. Is that understood? Yes, Lord Third. The ANBU vanished. Hiruzen looked down at the boy, at the seal on his stomach, at the impossible weight of expectation already settling on his small shoulders. I don't know what you are, the old man whispered. I don't know what Minato and Kushina gave you, or what that monster inside you will take. But I know this, you will be protected. You will be safe. And if I have to burn this village to the ground to keep that promise, I will. Naruto slept on, unaware of the promise, unaware of the burden, unaware of the being who had broken the universe to give him a chance. But somewhere in the depths of his dreams, a palace was being built. And in its halls, 2 figures stood waiting, patient as stars, and began to plan for the day their son would find his way home. The first time Naruto Namikaze, though he did not know that name, not yet, not for years, opened his eyes in the place that would become his sanctuary, he was 3 years old, hungry, and profoundly, achingly lonely. He did not understand the loneliness. He had never known anything else. The orphanage was loud and crowded and full of children who had families waiting for them somewhere, children who would be collected by aunts or uncles or grandparents when the paperwork was finished. Naruto had no one waiting. He had a room that smelled of disinfectant, a bed that was too short for his legs, and the constant, gnawing sense that he had been left behind. The dream started on a night when the rain was so loud it sounded like the sky was breaking. He was running. That was the first thing he understood. He was running through darkness, but the darkness was not empty. It was full of doors. Hundreds of them, thousands, stretching in every direction, rising into impossible heights and descending into depths that made his stomach clench when he looked down. He stopped running because he was tired, because he was always tired, because the orphanage matron had given him half a bowl of rice for dinner, and his legs were shaking. The door he stopped in front of was not special. It looked like all the others, dark wood, a handle of tarnished brass, a faint seam of light around the edges that promised something on the other side. But when he reached for it, his hand did not tremble. He did not know why. It should have. He was 3 years old, alone, lost in a dream that felt more real than the waking world. But his hand was steady, and when he pushed the door open, he did not hesitate. The light that spilled out was not the harsh yellow of the orphanage's fluorescent bulbs. It was gold and red and warm, like the sun through closed eyelids, like the hearth of a house that had been waiting for someone to come home. And in the center of the light, sitting at a table that groaned under the weight of food he had only ever seen in storybooks, 2 people were waiting. The man stood first. He was tall, with hair the color of sunlight and eyes that were doing something strange, crinkling at the corners, growing bright with something that might have been tears if he had let them fall. He was wearing a white coat with flames on the hem, and when he smiled, it was like watching the sun rise after a storm. Naruto, he said, and his voice cracked on the name. You found us. The woman was faster. She was across the room before the man had finished speaking, dropping to her knees in front of Naruto with a speed that should have been terrifying but was instead familiar. Her hair was red Redder than anything he had ever seen, red like the fire in the hearth, red like the blood that had dried on the matron's hands when she had cut herself chopping vegetables. But her eyes were kind. Her eyes were the kindest eyes he had ever seen. "Look at you," she whispered, and her hands hovered near his face, not quite touching, like she was afraid he would vanish if she made contact. "Look at you, Naruto. You're so big. You're so—" Her voice broke, and the tears she had been fighting spilled over. "You're so beautiful." Naruto did not know what to do. He had never been touched gently. He had been grabbed, dragged, pushed into corners and pulled out of them. He had been poked and prodded by doctors who looked at the seal on his stomach with expressions he could not name. But no one had ever held their hands like this, like he was something precious, something that might break if they gripped too hard. "I don't," he started, and his voice came out small, the way it always did when he tried to speak to the matron, and she waved him away. "Who are you?" The woman's face crumpled. She made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and finally, she touched him. Her hands cupped his face, palms warm and calloused in a way that felt like work and love all at once. "I'm your mother," she said. "My name is Kushina. And this—" She gestured at the man, who had moved to kneel beside her, his composure finally cracking. "This is your father, Minato. We've been waiting for you. We've been waiting so long to meet you." Naruto's world tilted. He had imagined this moment. Of course he had. Every orphan imagined it, the day when someone would come and explain that there had been a mistake, that they were wanted, that they belonged somewhere. But in his imagination, the people who came were always vague, faces without features, voices without names. He had never imagined his mother would have red hair and crying eyes and hands that shook when they touched his face. He had never imagined his father would look at him like he was the only thing in the universe worth seeing. "You're dead," he said, and the words came out flat, matter-of-fact. He did not know how he knew. He just knew. "Everyone says I don't have parents. Everyone says they died." Kushina's hands tightened on his face, not painfully, just desperately. "We did die," she said, and there was no evasion in her voice, no softening of the truth. "We died the night you were born. But we've been here, Naruto. We've been here the whole time, watching you, waiting for you to find us. And now you have." Naruto looked at them. Really looked. At the lines around his mother's eyes that spoke of laughter and pain in equal measure. At the calluses on his father's hands that spoke of work and war and something else, something that made him think of protection. At the way they knelt in front of him, not above him, not reaching down from some great height, but at his level, meeting his eyes like he was worth meeting. "Why?" he asked, and he did not know what he was asking. Why did they die? Why did they leave him? Why were they here now? Why did they look at him like he mattered? Minato reached out, slowly, giving Naruto time to pull away. When he didn't, Minato's hand settled on his shoulder, and the weight of it was grounding in a way Naruto had never experienced. "Because we love you," Minato said simply. "Because you are our son. Because whatever else you become, whatever power you carry, whatever burden the world places on you, you will never, ever carry it alone. Not while we're here." Naruto did not cry. He was 3 years old, and he had learned that crying did nothing, that tears dried and no one cared, that the only person who could make things better was himself. But something in his chest cracked open anyway, something he had not known was there, something that had been waiting for this moment longer than he had been alive. He did not throw himself into their arms. He was not that child, not yet, maybe not ever. But he took a step forward, and then another, and when Kushina's arms wrapped around him and Minato's joined them, he let himself be held. And for the first time in his short, lonely life, Naruto Uzumaki, Namake's, though he did not know it yet, did not feel alone. The palace grew with him. That was the first thing he learned about the place in his mind. It was not static, not a prison or a cage or any of the things the stories called inner worlds. It was alive. When he was happy, the halls filled with light. When he was sad, shadows gathered in corners and refused to move. When he was angry, and he was angry often, at the matron, at the children who whispered about him, at the world that had taken his parents and left him with nothing, the palace thrummed with something that felt like thunder waiting to break. His parents were always there. Not physically, they could not leave the palace, could not touch the outside world, could not protect him from the whispers and the cold shoulders and the way the adults looked at him when they thought he was not looking. But every night, when sleep finally claimed him, he would open his eyes in the great hall where they had first met, and they would be waiting. Kushina taught him to read. Not the books the orphanage gave him, the thin primers with their simple words and simpler stories. She taught him from scrolls that materialized when she called them, scrolls written in a language that burned gold and red when he looked at it, scrolls that smelled of fire and salt, and something that might have been home. "This is Uzumaki script," she told him, her finger tracing characters that seemed to move under her touch. Your grandmother taught it to me, and her grandmother taught it to her. It's not just writing, Naruto. It's sealing. It's the art of putting things into other things, of making the big fit into the small, of containing what cannot be contained. She paused, and her hand drifted to his stomach, to the place where the seal lived. It's how we keep you safe. Naruto looked down at his stomach, at the skin that was smooth and unmarked to his waking eyes but that, in the palace, swirled with patterns he was only beginning to understand. Is it there? He asked. The fox? Kushina's face did something complicated. Yes. But the fox is not your enemy, Naruto. He is complicated. He has been hurt, the way you have been hurt. The way I have been hurt. And hurt things lash out. They bite. But that doesn't mean they cannot be reached. Naruto considered this. He was 4 now, or almost 4, and he had learned that the world was not simple. The matron was cruel, but she had lost her husband in the war. The children were mean, but they were afraid. The adults looked at him with something that was not quite hatred, not quite fear, but something in between. I don't want to reach him, Naruto said, and the words came out harder than he intended. He hurt you. He hurt father. He's the reason you're here instead of out there. Kushina pulled him into her lap, and he let her, because he was 4 and sometimes, even when he wanted to be strong, being held was the only thing that made the quiet parts of his mind go still. You're right, she said quietly. Kurama hurt us. He killed a lot of people that night, people your father was trying to protect. People who might have been your friends, your teachers, your family. You have every right to hate him. She paused, and her arms tightened around him. But hate is heavy, Naruto. It's the heaviest thing you can carry. And you're already carrying so much. Minato taught him to fight. Not with weapons. Naruto was too young for that, his body too small, his coordination too uncertain. But he taught him to move, to breathe, to feel the chakra that pulsed through his body like a second heartbeat. Chakra is life, Minato explained, his hands forming seals that Naruto's small fingers could not yet copy. It's the energy that connects us to everything else. To the earth, to the air, to the people we love. When you learn to control your chakra, you learn to control yourself. And when you learn to control yourself, you learn to control the fox. Naruto finished, because he was 5 now and he had learned to finish his father's sentences. Minato's smile was sad. Partly. But more than that, you learned to control the power that was given to you. The power that chose you. Naruto frowned. He had always known he was different. The seal on his stomach was proof enough of that. But in the last year, something else had started to surface. Shadows that moved when he was angry. A presence at the edge of his awareness that was not Kurama, was not his parents, was something else entirely. Something that waited. What is it? He asked. The thing inside me. The thing that's not the fox. Minato and Kushina exchanged a look. It was the look they exchanged when they talked about things they did not think he was ready to hear, and it made something hot and sharp twist in his chest. I'm not a baby, he said, and his voice came out louder than he intended. I know something's wrong with me. The shadows, they move when I'm not looking. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see things. Places that aren't real. People that aren't. He stopped, because the word human was too big, too heavy, too full of meanings he did not know how to explain. Kushina knelt in front of him, her hands on his shoulders, her eyes level with his. There is nothing wrong with you, she said, and her voice was fierce in a way that reminded him of fire. Do you understand me? Nothing. What you have, what you carry, it is not a curse. It is not a punishment. It is a gift, Naruto. A gift from something older than the stars, something that saw you and chose you. Chose me for what? Kushina's face softened. For whatever you want to be. That's the gift, Naruto. It doesn't come with instructions. It doesn't come with a destiny. It comes with potential. With possibility. With the chance to become anything. Naruto looked down at his hands. They were small hands still, the hands of a child who had never held anything heavier than a book. But in the palace, in the space between waking and sleeping, they sometimes looked different. Longer. Stronger. Covered in shadows that moved like they had minds of their own. I don't want to become anything, he said quietly. I just want to be normal. Minato's laugh was soft, almost sad. Normal was never an option for you, Naruto. Not from the moment you were born. But that doesn't mean you can't be happy. It doesn't mean you can't be loved. It doesn't mean you can't find your own way. He knelt beside Kushina, and together they wrapped around him like a shield, like a wall against the world outside. We're here, Kushina whispered. We're always here. And when you're ready to become whatever you're going to become, we'll be right here. Watching. Waiting. Loving you? Naruto closed his eyes and let himself be held. In the depths of the palace, in a room that had no doors and no windows, something stirred. Something that had been waiting for longer than the palace had existed, longer than his parents had been dead, longer than the fox had been sealed. Something that wore the shape of a man in armor, that carried a sword that drank the light, that stood in the darkness and waited for the boy to be ready. Igris opened his eyes, and in the silence of the Shadow Realm, he smiled. Soon, he thought. Soon, the boy would come. And then the real training would begin. The Konoha Ninja Academy was not designed for children like Naruto Uzumaki. It was designed for children with parents who taught them the basic hand seals before they could write their names. For children with clans that passed down techniques like heirlooms, carefully preserved and meticulously improved. For children who arrived on the first day with uniforms that fit, lunches that were packed with care, and the quiet confidence of those who had never doubted their place in the world. Naruto arrived with a uniform 2 sizes too large, a lunch of stale rice balls that the matron had thrown together without looking at him, and a grin so wide and so bright that no one noticed the way his eyes stayed flat, stayed watchful, stayed waiting. Believe it! He shouted at the first person who looked at him, a girl with dark hair and eyes that were already calculating, already measuring. I'm gonna be the best ninja in the school! No, in the whole village! Believe it! The girl, Sakura, he would learn, though he did not care to remember, rolled her eyes and turned away. But someone else was watching. Someone with hair the color of pale gold, and eyes the color of summer sky. Ino Yamanaka had been trained to see what others missed. Her father was the head of the Yamanaka clan, a man who had built a career on understanding what lay beneath the surface. He had taught Ino to read people the way other parents taught their children to ride bikes or throw kunai. Posture, breathing, the micro-expressions that flickered across a face before the mask settled into place, these were the languages Ino had been speaking since she could form words. And the boy screaming about being the best ninja in the village was wearing a mask so thick she could barely see his real face beneath it. But she saw enough. She saw the way his hands never stopped moving, checking his pockets, touching his sleeves, cataloging his surroundings with a thoroughness that had nothing to do with the chaotic energy he projected. She saw the way his eyes, too blue, too bright, too something, tracked every person who entered the room, filing them away in categories she could only guess at. She saw the way his smile never reached his eyes, the way it sat on his face like a sign hung outside a shop, advertising something that was not for sale. Interesting, she thought, and filed the observation away for later. The first year of the academy was about basics. History, mathematics, the theory of chakra. Things that could be memorized, regurgitated, forgotten. Naruto excelled at none of them, or rather, he performed as if he was excelling at none of them. In the palace, Kushina drilled him on Uzumaki sealing theory, which made the academy's math problems look like the work of children. Minato walked him through advanced chakra control exercises that would have challenged a chunin. And at night, in the shadowed training grounds that existed only in his mind, a figure in black armor taught him to fight. Igris did not speak. Naruto had never heard his voice, had never seen his face beneath the helmet. But he did not need to. The Shadow Monarch's general taught with his body, with his sword, with the endless patience of something that had been waiting for this moment since before Naruto was born. Again, Igris would signal, and Naruto would rise from the dirt, from the shadow that had caught him, and try again. 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 By the time Naruto was 7, he had been trained by a legendary shinobi, a master of sealing, and a being who had fought wars in dimensions his parents could not even name. He could have graduated the academy in a week, could have left every instructor and every student in the dust. Instead, he tripped over his own feet in the obstacle course. He mixed up his hand seals during basic technique demonstrations. He asked questions that made the other children laugh and the teachers sigh. And every night, in the palace, Kushina would hold him and tell him she was proud. Minato would nod, quiet and steady, and say nothing about the disappointment that flickered in his eyes when he thought Naruto was not looking. And in the shadows, Igris would wait, patient as death, for the day when the boy would stop hiding. The other children learned to leave Naruto alone. Not because he was powerful, they had no way of knowing that. Not because he was dangerous, he was too careful, too controlled, to let that slip. They left him alone because he was weird, because he talked too loud and laughed too long and never, ever seemed to understand when a joke was being made at his expense. Or so they thought. In truth, Naruto understood perfectly. He had been the butt of jokes since he could remember, had learned to parse cruelty from kindness with an accuracy that would have impressed Ino's father. But reacting, showing that he understood, would have required lowering the mask. And the mask was the only thing keeping him safe. So he laughed when they laughed at him. He grinned when they called him names. He let them believe he was too stupid to understand, too simple to hurt, too nothing to be worth the effort of real cruelty. It worked. For the most part. But Ino was watching. She always watched. "You're not stupid." The words came out of nowhere, cutting through the empty classroom like a kunai through silk. Naruto froze with his hand on the door, his backpack half-zipped, his carefully constructed expression of cheerful obliviousness sliding into place a second too late. Ino was sitting on the windowsill, her legs dangling, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made something in his chest tighten. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, and his voice was exactly the right pitch of confusion, exactly the right tone of dismissive cheer. "I'm the dead last, believe it!" Ino's lips curved into a smile that was not unkind, but was not fooled either. "You failed the transformation test yesterday. You turned yourself into a frog. A frog, Naruto. Do you know how hard it is to screw up that technique that badly?" He shrugged, the movement deliberately sloppy. "I'm just not good at." "You're not just not good at it," Ino interrupted. "You're perfectly not good at it. There's a difference." The silence stretched between them. Outside, Naruto could hear the sounds of the academy emptying, children running home to parents who were waiting, families who were whole. Inside, Ino's eyes were still fixed on him, still patient, still waiting. "I don't know what you want me to say," he finally offered. Ino slid off the windowsill, landing silently on the polished wood floor. She was taller than him, he realized. Not by much, but enough to matter when she was standing this close. "I want you to say the truth," she said simply. "Just once. Just to me. Because I've been watching you for 3 years, Naruto Uzumaki, and I know you're not what you pretend to be. I know you're smarter than you act. I know you're stronger than you show. And I want to know why." He could have deflected. He was good at deflecting. He could have laughed, made a joke, changed the subject, disappeared into the crowd of students who were already forgetting he existed. But something in her voice stopped him. Something in the way she said his name, like it mattered, like he mattered. "I'm not trying to hide," he said, and even to his own ears, the words sounded hollow. Ino raised an eyebrow. "Could have fooled me." "I'm just..." He stopped. Started again. "I'm just trying to survive." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than he had intended. Ino's expression shifted, the sharp observation giving way to something softer. Something that looked almost like understanding. "Because of the fox," she said. It wasn't a question. Naruto's hands clenched at his sides. "How do you?" "My father's the Yamanaka clan head," Ino said quietly. "I've heard things. About what happened that night. About what was sealed inside you." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was gentler. "I know what people say about you. What they think. But I also know my father says that sometimes the biggest burdens are given to the people who can carry them." Naruto laughed, and there was nothing cheerful about it. "I'm not carrying anything. I'm just..." "You're just hiding," Ino finished for him. "Pretending to be weak so people won't be afraid of you. Pretending to be stupid so people won't expect anything from you. Pretending to be nothing so no one will try to use you for what you are." He wanted to deny it. The words were there, ready to be spoken, ready to rebuild the mask she had so casually dismantled. But when he opened his mouth, what came out was something else entirely. "How did you know?" Ino smiled, and for a moment she looked almost sad. "Because I do the same thing. Not as much as you, I don't have a demon inside me. But I know what it's like to be seen as something you're not. To have people expect things from you because of your name, your family, the blood in your veins." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of darker blue in her eyes, the small scar on her chin that she had never explained. "I'm not going to tell anyone," she said. "Whatever you're hiding, whatever you're protecting, it's yours. But I want you to know that you don't have to hide from me. Not if you don't want to." Naruto stood in the empty classroom, with the afternoon light turning everything gold and soft, and felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been locked away since the first time the matron had looked at him with fear in her eyes, since the first time the other children had whispered about the demon in their midst. "Okay," he said, and his voice was smaller than he intended. "Okay." Ino nodded once, sharply, and turned toward the door. "Good. Now come on, dead last. I'll walk you home. My father's making ramen tonight, and you look like you haven't eaten anything that wasn't from a vending machine in weeks." He followed her out of the classroom, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, he wasn't pretending. That night, in the palace, Kushina was waiting with a smile that could have lit the whole village. "She's smart," Kushina said, pulling him into a hug that smelled of pine and something sweet. "And kind. The Yamanaka are good people. Her grandmother and I were friends back before. She stopped, and her smile flickered but did not fall. She'll be good for you, Naruto. Someone who sees you. Really sees you. That's rare. Minato was more reserved, as always. He sat in his chair by the fire, watching Naruto with an expression that was hard to read. Be careful, he said finally. Not because she's dangerous, but because when people start to see you, they start to have expectations. And expectations become demands. And demands become. Minato, Kushina said sharply. He held up his hands. I'm not saying don't trust her. I'm saying be sure. Trust is precious. It's the most precious thing you can give someone. Make sure they deserve it. Naruto looked between them, at his mother's fierce protectiveness and his father's careful caution, and felt something settle in his chest. A certainty he had not known he was missing. I will, he said. I'll be sure. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he was back in his small room in the orphanage, staring at the ceiling that had been his whole world for 8 years. But for the first time, it did not feel like a cage. It felt like a waiting room. And for the first time, he thought he might not have to wait alone. In the shadows of his room, in the space between the physical and the eternal, Idris stood watch. The boy had taken a step forward tonight, a small step, but a step nonetheless. The general's hand drifted to his sword, and for a moment, he allowed himself to imagine the day when the boy would no longer need to hide. Soon, he thought. Soon, the shadows would answer. Soon, the world would see what he had seen from the beginning. Soon, the boy would become what he was always meant to be. But not yet. Not quite yet. Idris settled back into the darkness, patient as the grave, and waited. Ino Yamanaka learned the truth on a Tuesday. There was nothing special about the day. The sun was too bright for autumn, the air too warm, and the Academy's chakra theory instructor had spent the entire morning droning about the difference between physical and spiritual energy in a voice that made even the most attentive student's eyes glaze over. Naruto had been in rare form that day, louder than usual, more obnoxious, tripping over his own feet so many times that even the instructors were starting to look at him with something like pity. It was a good performance. Ino had seen better, but not by much. But when class ended, when the other students filed out in the usual chaos of laughter and complaints, and whispered plans for the afternoon, Naruto didn't move. He sat at his desk, staring at the board with an expression that was not confused, not bored, not anything he had worn in class. He was thinking. Really thinking. And Ino, who had been watching him for 3 years, who had memorized the rhythms of his performance, and the tells he didn't know he had, recognized the shift instantly. She didn't approach him. She had learned, in the months since their conversation in the empty classroom, that Naruto was like a stray cat, too much direct attention, and he would vanish into whatever hiding place he had constructed for himself. So she sat at her own desk, pretended to organize her things, and waited. You're still here. His voice was quiet. Not the boisterous shout he used in public, not the careful neutrality he used when he was trying to hide. Something in between. Something real. You're still here too, she said, not looking up. A pause. She could feel him looking at her, could almost hear the calculation happening behind those two blue eyes. The chakra theory lesson today, he said. It was wrong. Ino's hand stilled on her bag. What do you mean? The instructor said that physical and spiritual energy combine in equal measure to form chakra. That's not true. They're not equal. They're not even the same kind of thing. Physical energy is finite, measurable, quantifiable. Spiritual energy is. He paused, searching for the word. Infinite. It's not something you combine with anything. It's something you become. She turned to look at him then, and what she saw made her breath catch. His mask was still in place, she could see the edges of it, the careful blankness he wore like armor, but underneath, something was bleeding through. Something vast. Something that made the air in the classroom feel thin, like she was standing at the edge of a cliff and looking down. How do you know that? She asked, and her voice was steady, even if her hands were not. Naruto looked at her, and for a moment she thought he was going to deflect. To joke. To hide. But something in her expression must have convinced him, because instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a kunai. You want to see something? He asked. She should have said no. Every instinct she had developed in her father's house, every lesson about safety and boundaries and the importance of knowing when to walk away, all of it was screaming that this was a bad idea. But she had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. So she nodded. Naruto balanced the kunai on his palm, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, the shadow beneath it moved. Not the shadow cast by the blade, that was still, fixed, obedient to the light streaming through the windows. This was something else. Something that rose from the floor like ink spreading through water, wrapping around the kunai, lifting it from his palm. The blade hovered in the air, suspended by darkness that seemed to drink the light around it, and Ino could not breathe. "What is that?" she whispered. Naruto's hand was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched. "It's me. Part of me. A part I've been hiding since I was old enough to know I needed to hide." The shadow around the kunai shifted, forming shapes that Ino could almost recognize. Hands. Faces. Something that might have been a sword. "It's called the Shadow Monarch," Naruto continued, and there was something in his voice that she had never heard before. Not pride, something heavier. Something that sounded like resignation. "I didn't choose it. It was given to me, the same night I was given the fox. A gift from something my parents called a creator deity. A being that thought I needed power more than I needed a normal life." The shadow collapsed, and the kunai clattered to the desk. Ino jumped, her heart pounding, but Naruto didn't move. He was looking at his hands again, the way he sometimes did when he thought no one was watching. "I can control shadows," he said quietly. "I can make them into soldiers. Weapons. Armor. I've been training with a being. A general from somewhere else. For years. And that's not all." He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw something that looked like fear in his eyes. "There's more. The fox is in me, but he's not the only thing. My parents, they're in there too. Their souls. They've been with me since I was born, teaching me, training me, preparing me for something I still don't understand. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see things. Places. People who aren't people. A woman with white hair and eyes like the moon who looks at me like she knows me. A man in armor who never speaks. A palace that gets bigger every year, with rooms I haven't opened yet and doors I'm afraid to go through." He stopped, and his hands were shaking now. Ino had never seen him shake. Not once, in 3 years of watching him take hits that should have bruised, eat insults that should have cut, carry a weight that should have broken him. He had never shaken. Until now. "I'm not normal," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "I'm not even close to normal. And every day, I wake up and I pretend to be the dead last, the idiot, the loser, because if anyone knew what I really was—" "What you really are," Ino interrupted. Her voice was sharper than she intended, cutting through his spiral with the precision her father had taught her. "What are you really, Naruto?" He stared at her. "I just told you. I have a demon inside me. My dead parents living in my head. Powers from something that isn't even from this world. I'm a boy," Ino said flatly. "You're a boy who has been given more than anyone should have to carry, who has been hiding for so long he's forgotten that hiding isn't the same as surviving. You're a boy who could have let the darkness eat him years ago, but instead, he learned to make it into something that protects him. You're a boy who has every reason to be angry, to be bitter, to be cruel, and instead, you trip over your own feet to make people laugh." She stood up, crossed the room, and stopped in front of his desk. "You're Naruto," she said. "Just Naruto. And I don't care about the fox, or the shadows, or whatever being decided to give you gifts you never asked for. I care about the idiot who eats expired ramen because no one remembered to feed him. The idiot who let Sasuke punch him in the face last week because he knew Sasuke needed to hit someone and he was the only one who wouldn't hit back. The idiot who sat in this classroom every day for 3 years, pretending to be less than he is, because he was afraid of what people would do if they knew the truth." She reached out and took his shaking hands in hers. "You're not a monster, Naruto. You're not a weapon. You're not a god. You're a kid who has been alone for too long, carrying something that would have crushed anyone else. And I'm not going to let you carry it alone anymore." His eyes were wet. She had never seen him cry. She wasn't sure he had ever let himself cry, not in front of anyone, not in all the years since his parents died. "You don't know what you're getting into," he said, and his voice was barely a whisper. "The things that are coming, I can feel them. They're getting closer. And when they get here, everyone around me is going to be in danger. Everyone He stopped. The word he had almost said hung in the air between them, heavy and fragile. Ino squeezed his hands. "Then I guess I'd better get stronger, hadn't I? So I can protect you right back." He laughed. It was wet and broken and the most honest sound she had ever heard from him. "You're crazy," he said. "Probably," she agreed. "But you're the one who has dead parents living in his head, so I think I'm winning the normal contest." He laughed again, and this time it was almost real. Almost light. They sat like that for a long time, in the empty classroom with the afternoon light turning everything gold, and Ino did not let go of his hands. That night, Naruto dreamed of the palace. But this time, when he walked through its halls, he was not alone. Ino stood beside him, her eyes wide, her hand gripping his arm with a force that would have bruised a normal person. She was staring at the walls, at the ceilings that rose into impossible heights, at the shadows that moved in the corners like living things. "This is what you see every night?" she asked, and her voice was hushed, almost reverent. "Every night," he confirmed. "It changes sometimes. Grows. New rooms appear when I learn something new, or when something changes. It's like the palace is a map of my mind. Every room is something I know, something I am, something I could become." Ino's eyes tracked across the hall, taking in the details with the sharp observation that had become so familiar to him. "And your parents? Where are they?" As if summoned, a door at the end of the hall swung open, and Kushina appeared. She was laughing, her red hair wild, her face lit with a joy that made her look almost too bright to look at directly. "Ino Yamanaka," Kushina said, and her voice was warm, welcoming, nothing like the fierce ghost who had trained Naruto in the art of sealing. "I've been wanting to meet you for so long. Minato! She's here!" Minato appeared behind his wife, and Ino's breath caught. She had seen pictures of the fourth Hokage, of course. Everyone in the village had. But the pictures didn't capture the warmth in his eyes, the easy confidence of his stance. The way he looked at his son like Naruto was the only thing in the universe that mattered. "You found him," Minato said, and his voice was gentle. "You found him, and you didn't run." Ino's chin lifted. "Why would I run?" Kushina laughed again, and it was the sound of wind through leaves, of water over stone, of something that had been waiting to be free. "That's what I said. Minato was worried, of course. He's always worried. But I told him, the Yamanaka don't raise cowards. And Ino Yamanaka is her father's daughter." She crossed the hall in 3 strides and pulled Ino into a hug that smelled of pine and warmth, and something that might have been home. "Thank you," Kushina whispered, and her voice was not laughing now. "Thank you for seeing him. For not running. For being exactly what he needs." Ino hugged back, because what else could she do? And when she looked over Kushina's shoulder at Naruto, standing between his parents with a smile that was finally real, she felt something settle in her chest. Something that felt like belonging. Later, when Ino had gone back to the waking world and Naruto was alone with his parents, Kushina pulled him onto the couch by the fire and wrapped her arms around him. "She's good for you," she said softly. "I knew she would be." Minato sat in his chair, watching them with an expression that was softer than Naruto had ever seen it. "She'll be important," he said. "Not just for you. For what's coming." "What is coming?" Naruto asked. It was the question he had been asking for years, the question no one would answer. "You keep talking about it. About things getting worse. About something I need to prepare for. But no one will tell me what it is." Minato and Kushina exchanged a look. It was the look they exchanged when they talked about things they didn't think he was ready to hear, and for once, Naruto didn't let it pass. "I'm 9 years old," he said. "I have a demon inside me. I have powers that no one in this village can explain. I've been training with a general from another dimension since I was 5. And I have a girl in my life who knows everything about me and didn't run. I think I'm ready." Minato was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, crossed the room, and knelt in front of his son. "The woman with white hair," he said quietly. "The one you've been seeing. Her name is Kaguya Otsutsuki. She's not human. She's not even from this world. And she's been watching you since before you were born." Naruto's blood ran cold. "What does she want?" Minato's hand found his shoulder, steady and warm. "I don't know. But she's connected to the power you were given. To the shadows. To the fox. To everything that makes you what you are. And one day, she's going to come for you." "When?" "I don't know that either." Minato's eyes were dark, and for the first time, Naruto saw something in them that looked like fear. "But when she does, you're going to need every power you've been given. Every skill you've learned. Every person who loves you. Because she's not just a threat to you, Naruto. She's a threat to everything." Kushina's arms tightened around him. "But that's not today," she said firmly. "Today, you have a friend who knows your secrets and stayed. Today, you're 9 years old, and you're allowed to be 9 years old. Tomorrow can worry about itself." Naruto leaned into his mother's embrace and let himself be held. He was not ready. Not for Kaguya, not for whatever was coming, not for the weight that was already settling on his shoulders. But for the first time, he didn't think he had to be ready alone. In the shadows of the palace, in a room that had no doors, Igris opened his eyes. The boy had taken another step forward. A friend, a confidant, a connection to the world outside his own head. It was progress. Dangerous progress, but progress nonetheless. The general's hand found his sword, and in the darkness of the shadow realm, he smiled. Soon, he thought. Soon, the training would change. Soon, the boy would learn what it truly meant to command the shadows. And soon, the world would learn what it meant to fear the dawn. The night Mizuki came for him, Naruto was dreaming of a woman with white hair and eyes like the moon. She was standing in the center of a garden that bloomed with flowers he had never seen, flowers that seemed to drink the light and turn it into something else. Her hair moved in a wind that didn't touch him, and her eyes, those terrible, beautiful eyes, were fixed on something in the distance. "You're coming closer," she said, and her voice was the sound of glaciers calving, of continents shifting. "The seals are weakening. The shadows are growing. Soon you will be what you were always meant to be." Naruto's hands clenched at his sides. "What am I meant to be?" She turned to look at him, and for a moment, he saw something in her expression that he couldn't name. Not cruelty. Not kindness. Something older. Something that might have been patience. "That is for you to decide," she said. "But you cannot decide until you have all the pieces. Until you understand what was taken from you. What was given to you. What you were always meant to become." She raised her hand, and the garden dissolved into light. Naruto felt himself falling, felt the dreams slipping away, and he reached for her, desperate for answers he didn't even know how to ask. "Wait." He woke to darkness and the sound of someone pounding on his door. The academy was empty when he arrived, the halls dark, the classrooms silent. Mizuki had told him to meet him here, had promised him a secret test, a chance to prove himself, a shortcut to graduation that no one else would have. Naruto had known it was a trap from the moment the words left Mizuki's mouth. He had known, and he had come anyway. Because Mizuki was not the only one waiting in the dark. He felt them before he saw them. Shadows that were not his own, moving through the halls with a purpose that had nothing to do with the academy's empty classrooms. Chakra signatures that burned with malice, with hunger, with the kind of desperation that made people do terrible things. Mizuki was waiting in the training yard, his silver hair catching the moonlight, his smile a slash of white in the darkness. "Naruto," he said, and his voice was warm, encouraging, exactly the voice he had used in class when he was pretending to be the kind teacher who believed in the dead last. "I knew you'd come." Naruto stopped at the edge of the yard. He was wearing his usual clothes, the orange jacket, the worn pants, the sandals that were falling apart. He looked exactly like the failure everyone expected him to be. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," Naruto said, and his voice was small, uncertain, exactly the voice of a child who had been promised something he couldn't have. Mizuki's smile widened. "You don't have to do anything. I just need you to answer a question for me. A simple question." He stepped forward, and Naruto stepped back. The dance was familiar, as old as his time in the academy. The predator circling, the prey retreating. But tonight the steps were wrong. Tonight Naruto was not retreating because he was afraid. He was retreating because he needed Mizuki to think he was. "Why did the Third Hokage forbid you from graduating?" Mizuki asked. "Why does he keep you here, year after year, when everyone knows you'll never be a real shinobi?" Naruto's shoulders hunched. "I don't." "It's because of the fox," Mizuki said, and his voice was almost gentle. "He's afraid of what you are. What's inside you. He keeps you here because he wants to control you. To make sure you never become powerful enough to threaten him." Naruto's hands were shaking. Good. He needed them to shake. "The scroll," Mizuki continued. "The one in the Hokage's tower. It contains a technique that would let you graduate. A technique that would make you strong enough that no one could hold you back. I want you to steal it for me. For yourself. For the future you deserve." The silence stretched between them. Naruto could feel his father's presence in the back of his mind, a warm, steady pressure that was trying not to interfere. He could feel his mother's fury, barely contained, a fire that wanted to burn. And deeper, in the shadows that lived in his chest, he could feel Igris waiting. "Okay," Naruto said. "I'll do it." The scroll was heavier than he expected. It sat in his hands like a dead thing, the paper cold, the seals on its surface pulsing with a light that only he could see. The forbidden scroll of seals. A library of techniques that had been locked away because they were too dangerous, too powerful, too much for anyone who wasn't ready to carry them. Naruto was ready. He had been ready since before he could walk. But that wasn't why he had taken the scroll. He had taken it because Mizuki had shown his hand. Because the trap was finally springing. Because after 9 years of hiding, of pretending, of being exactly what everyone expected him to be. The mask was about to come off. And Naruto was terrified. "You don't have to do this," Kushina said in his mind. Her voice was soft, gentle, the voice she used when he woke from nightmares. "You can still walk away. You can still hide." "No," Minato said, and his voice was harder, heavier, the voice of a man who had made choices that cost everything. "No more hiding. The moment is here. If he doesn't act now, he'll be running for the rest of his life." Naruto stood in the training yard, the scroll in his hands, and waited for Mizuki to come. He didn't wait long. Mizuki appeared at the edge of the yard, Iruka with him, the Chunin's face twisted with betrayal and fear. "There he is," Mizuki said, and his voice was triumphant. "The demon. The monster. He stole the scroll, Iruka. Just like I said he would." Iruka's face was pale, his hands shaking, but when he looked at Naruto, there was something in his expression that wasn't fear. Something that looked almost like grief. "Naruto," he said, and his voice cracked. "Why?" Naruto didn't answer. He was watching Mizuki, watching the way the Chunin's hand drifted toward the shuriken at his belt, watching the way his smile sharpened into something cruel. "Because he's a demon," Mizuki said. "Because he's the Nine Tails. Because everything he's ever done, everything he's ever been, is a lie designed to destroy this village." He stepped forward, and his voice rose, filling the yard with words that Naruto had heard 1,000 times before. "You think he's a failure? You think he's weak? He's the most dangerous thing in this village, and he's been hiding it since the day he was born. He's not Naruto Uzumaki. He's the nine-tailed fox, wearing a child's face, waiting for the moment to strike." Iruka's eyes went wide. He looked at Naruto, really looked, and Naruto saw the moment the truth hit him. The seal. The whisker marks. The years of failure that didn't make sense, the power that should have been there and wasn't. "You knew," Iruka whispered. "You knew all along." Mizuki's smile was a blade. "Everyone knew. Everyone except you, apparently. The great Iruka-sensei, who saw a student instead of a monster. How sweet. How pathetic." He pulled the shuriken from his belt, and the moonlight caught the edge, turning it into a crescent of silver death. "But don't worry. I'll fix your mistake. I'll kill the demon, and I'll take the scroll, and I'll become—" He never finished the sentence. The shadow that rose beneath his feet was not Naruto's. It was too large, too solid, too real to be cast by anything in the training yard. It rose like a wave, like a wall, like the hand of something that had been waiting in the darkness since before Mizuki was born. And in the center of that shadow, Naruto Uzumaki stood. He was not shaking anymore. His hands were steady, his breathing even, his eyes, those two blue eyes that had always been too bright, too knowing, too something, were fixed on Mizuki with an expression that made the Chunin's blood run cold. "You're going to kill me?" Naruto asked, and his voice was quiet. Not loud. Not angry. Just quiet. The shadow rose higher, blocking out the moon, blocking out the stars, blocking out everything except the boy at its center. "You're going to kill me, and take the scroll, and become what? A traitor? A missing nin? A footnote in the history of a village that will hunt you to the ends of the earth?" He took a step forward, and the shadow moved with him, a cloak of darkness that seemed to drink the light from the air. "You've been planning this for years, haven't you? Waiting for the right moment. The right tool. And you found me. The demon. The monster. The child everyone hated so much that no one would notice when he disappeared." His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment the mask slipped. Not the mask of the fool, not the mask of the failure. Something deeper. Something that had been there since the first time he heard the word demon whispered in the orphanage. "You thought I was a weapon," he said. "A tool. Something you could use and discard. Something that wasn't human enough to matter." The shadow around him pulsed, and Mizuki felt something he had never felt before. Not fear. Fear was too small a word for what was rising in his chest. Terror. "But you were wrong," Naruto said. "I'm not a weapon. I'm not a tool. I'm not a demon or a monster or anything you can use." He raised his hand, and the shadow answered. "I'm just a kid who's been hiding for 9 years. And I'm done hiding." The shadow struck. It was not a blow. Not an attack. It was simply the darkness itself, reaching out and wrapping around Mizuki, lifting him off his feet, holding him suspended in the air like a fly in amber. The Chunin's face went white, his mouth opened in a scream that never came, and the shuriken fell from his hand with a clatter that was the loudest sound in the world. "I'm not going to kill you," Naruto said, and his voice was still quiet, still calm, still the voice of a child who had just done something that should have been impossible. I'm not going to let the shadows take you. I'm not going to become the monster you think I am. He looked at Mizuki, and for a moment there was something almost like pity in his eyes. But I'm not going to let you hurt anyone else. Not Irika-sensei. Not the village. Not any other kid who thinks you're someone they can trust. The shadow tightened, and Mizuki's consciousness flickered. You're going to tell the Hokage everything. And then you're going to spend the rest of your life in a prison cell, thinking about what you did tonight. About what you almost did. About the child you tried to use and destroy. Mizuki's eyes rolled back in his head, and the shadow released him. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious, his breathing shallow but steady. Naruto stood in the center of the training yard, the scroll still in his hands, and let the shadows recede. They pulled back like a tide, flowing into his feet, his hands, his chest, settling back into the place where they lived when he wasn't using them. The training yard was quiet. The moon was out again, silver and cold, casting normal shadows that behaved exactly as they should. Irika was staring at him. Naruto started, and his voice cracked. The mask was gone. He didn't have the strength to put it back. Irika-sensei, I can explain. I didn't. Irika moved. Naruto flinched, expecting a blow, expecting the hatred he had seen in so many eyes, expecting the rejection that had been waiting for him since the day he was born. Instead, Irika's arms wrapped around him. You idiot! Irika said, and his voice was wet, broken, the voice of a man who had just watched his student become something he didn't understand. You absolute idiot! Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me help you? Naruto stood frozen in Irika's arms, the scroll pressing between them, his hands still shaking from the effort of controlling the shadows. I was scared. He whispered. I was so scared. Everyone always looked at me like I was something to be afraid of. And I thought if anyone knew, you'd look at me the same way. Irika's arms tightened. I'm not afraid of you, Naruto. I'm not. He pulled back, his hands on Naruto's shoulders, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. I'm proud of you. Do you understand? I'm so proud of you I can barely breathe. Naruto's eyes burned. But I stole the scroll. I lied to everyone. I hid who I was for years. A child, Irika said firmly. A child who was given more than anyone should have to carry and still chose to protect people. Still chose to be kind. Still chose to be good when being good was the hardest thing in the world. He pulled Naruto back into the hug, and this time, Naruto hugged back. I've got you, Irika said. Whatever comes next, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the Hokage says, I've got you. You're not alone anymore. You never were. Naruto closed his eyes and let himself be held. In the back of his mind, Kushina was crying. Minato was silent. And somewhere in the shadows, Idris was waiting. But for now, Naruto didn't need them. For now, he just needed to be held. The Hokage arrived an hour later, summoned by Anbu, who had sensed the disturbance in the training yard. He found Mizuki unconscious, Irika sitting with Naruto in the center of the yard, and a forbidden scroll that had been opened and read and returned without a single technique removed. You didn't use it, Hiruzen said, and his voice was unreadable. Naruto looked up at him, and for the first time, he didn't try to hide. I didn't need to. Hiruzen's eyes moved to the shadows that still clung to Naruto's feet, unwilling to fully retreat. So I see. He sat down across from them, old bones creaking, old eyes sharp. How long? Since I was born, Naruto said. My parents, they're still with me. In my mind. They've been training me. Preparing me. For something I didn't understand until tonight. Hiruzen's expression flickered. Minato. Kushina. Yes. The third Hokage was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than Naruto had ever heard it. I made a mistake, he said. When your parents died, I made a choice. To hide what you were. To keep you safe. To protect you from the people who would use you or hurt you. But in trying to protect you, I left you alone. I let you suffer. I let you carry a weight that should never have been placed on any child's shoulders. He looked at Naruto, and there was something in his eyes that looked almost like grief. I am sorry, Naruto. I am so sorry. I failed your parents. I failed you. And I cannot undo what was done. But I can promise you this, from tonight forward, you will not be alone. You will not be hidden. You will not be the secret that this village keeps in the dark. He reached out and placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. You are Uzumaki Naruto. son of Minato and Kushina, holder of the 9 tails. And tonight you proved that you are more than any of those things. You proved that you are worthy of the power you carry. Worthy of the trust one should have given you years ago. Naruto looked at the old man's hand on his shoulder, at the shadows still clinging to his feet, at the scroll that held techniques that could destroy armies and reshape nations. I don't want to be worthy, he said quietly. I just want to be a person. Hiruzen's smile was sad, but it was real. Then be a person. A person who protects. A person who chooses. A person who carries the weight of the world and still finds a way to be kind. That is more than most gods ever achieve. He stood, and the ANBU moved to collect Mizuki's unconscious form. Tomorrow we will talk. About your future. About what you want. About the power you carry and the choices you will have to make. But tonight, he looked at Iruka, still sitting beside Naruto, still watching him with eyes that held nothing but warmth. Tonight you should go home. You have a sensei who cares about you. And I think perhaps you have not had enough of that in your life. Iruka stood and offered Naruto his hand. Come on, he said. I'll make you some ramen. And then you can tell me everything you've been hiding. Every single thing. Naruto took his hand and let himself be pulled to his feet. For the first time in 9 years, he didn't feel like he was carrying something. He didn't feel the weight of the fox, the shadows, the expectations of a village that had never wanted him. He just felt like Naruto. And that, he thought, might be enough. The Hokage's office was smaller than Naruto had imagined. He had pictured something grand, something worthy of the man who had led the village through 2 wars and the aftermath of the 9 tails attack. But the office was just a room, wood-paneled, cluttered with scrolls, smelling of pipe smoke and old paper. The kind of room where decisions that shaped nations were made, but also the kind of room where an old man might sit and watch the village he loved grow and change and sometimes break. Hiruzen was waiting for him, seated behind his desk, his face unreadable. 2 ANBU stood in the shadows, their presence a weight in the room that Naruto could feel but not see. He was not afraid of them. He had not been afraid of anything since the night in the training yard. But he was nervous. You don't have to be, Kushina said in his mind. He was your father's teacher. He loved you in his way. He just didn't know how to show it. Be careful, Minato added. He's a good man. But he's also a politician. And politicians have loyalties that don't always align with what's right. Naruto pushed their voices to the back of his mind and focused on the old man in front of him. Thank you for coming, Hiruzen said. His voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who had spent a lifetime learning to say exactly what he meant and nothing more. I imagine you have questions. Naruto sat in the chair across from the desk. It was too big for him, his feet dangling, his hands folded in his lap. He looked like a child playing at being an adult, and he knew it. I have a lot of questions, he said. But I think you have more. Hiruzen's lips twitched. Perceptive. You get that from your mother. She could see through anything, lies, deception, the walls people built around themselves. It drove your father crazy sometimes. He was a terrible liar. Naruto didn't smile. I'm not here to talk about my parents. No, Hiruzen agreed. You're here to talk about what happens now. After Mizuki. After the training yard. After you showed this village exactly what you've been hiding for 9 years. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Naruto's face. The council wants to know what you are. The ANB want to know how to contain you. The clan heads want to know if you're a threat or an asset. And I. He paused, and something in his expression shifted. Softened. I want to know what you want, Naruto. For yourself. For your future. For the power you carry. Naruto was quiet for a long moment. He could feel his parents in his mind, waiting, watching, letting him find his own words. I want to be a shinobi, he said finally. Not because of the power. Not because of the fox. I want to be a shinobi because my father was. Because my mother was. Because it's the only thing I've ever wanted that was mine. He looked up at Hiruzen, and his eyes were steady. But I want to be a shinobi on my terms. Not as a weapon. Not as a symbol. Not as something this village can use and discard when I'm no longer useful. As a person. As Naruto. Hiruzen was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. That's not an easy thing to ask for. The power you carry, the fox, the shadows, whatever else was given to you, it makes you dangerous. It makes you valuable. And there are people in this village who will see that value and want to use it. People who will see that danger and want to destroy it. I can protect you from some of them. But not all. Not forever. Naruto's hands tightened in his lap. I don't need you to protect me. I need you to let me protect myself. Hiruzen's eyes widened. For a moment, he looked like he was going to argue. But then he laughed, a short, surprised sound that seemed to take him off guard as much as it did Naruto. You sound like your father, he said. He used to say the same thing. I don't need you to protect me, sensei. I need you to trust me. And he was right. He was always right in the end. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk, his gaze direct. Here's what I can offer you, Naruto. Graduation from the academy. Effective immediately. You have more than earned it. A team, when one can be assembled that is worthy of your skills. Training from the best instructors in the village. And my word as the third Hokage, that you will be treated as a shinobi of Konoha. Not a weapon. Not a monster. A shinobi. He paused, and his eyes were sharp. But I need something from you in return. I need to know that the power you carry will not be used against this village. I need to know that the shadows you command will answer to you, and that you will command them with the same honor your father commanded his men. I need to know that you are not just Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who survived, but Naruto Uzumaki, the man who will protect. Naruto stood. He didn't plan to. His body moved before his mind caught up, pushing him out of the chair, bringing him to his feet in front of the Hokage's desk. I will protect this village, he said, and his voice was not a child's voice. It was something older. Something that had been waiting to speak for 9 years. Not because you asked me to. Not because it's my duty. But because it was my father's village. My mother's village. The village they died to protect. And I will not let their sacrifice be for nothing. He met Hiruzen's eyes, and for a moment, the old man saw something in them that made his breath catch. Something that looked like Minato's resolve and Kushina's fire, and something else. Something that was entirely Naruto. The shadows will answer to me. The fox will answer to me. And I will answer to no one but myself and the people I choose to protect. If that's not enough for you, then there's nothing left to say. The silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. One of the ANBUs shifted in the shadows, and Naruto felt the weight of their attention, the calculation, the fear. Then Hiruzen laughed again. Louder this time, freer, the laugh of a man who had just seen something he had not expected to see in a very long time. Your father, he said, shaking his head, used to make the same speeches. Always so serious. Always so sure of what he believed. And always right. He stood, and for a moment, he was not the third Hokage, old and tired and worn down by years of war and loss. He was Sarutobi Hiruzen, the professor, the god of shinobi, the man who had trained the Sannin and led his village through its darkest hours. You will be a shinobi of Konoha, Naruto Uzumaki. You will be trained. You will be protected. And when the time comes, you will be the shield that stands between this village and the darkness that is coming. He extended his hand across the desk. Do we have an agreement? Naruto looked at the old man's hand. At the scars that crisscrossed the palm, the knuckles swollen with age, the fingers that had formed seals that could move mountains and summon death. He took it. We have an agreement. The days that followed were strange. Word of what had happened in the training yard spread through the village like wildfire, burning through the rumors and whispers that had surrounded Naruto since his birth. Some people looked at him differently now, with fear, with respect, with something that might have been hope. Others looked away, unable to meet his eyes, unable to reconcile the boy they had dismissed for 9 years with the figure who had commanded shadows in the moonlight. Naruto didn't care. He had spent his whole life being looked at, being watched, being judged. A few more eyes didn't change anything. What changed was the way he moved through the world. He stopped pretending. Not completely, some habits were too deep to break overnight, but he stopped hiding. He walked through the village with his head up, his shoulders straight, his eyes open. He answered questions honestly when people asked them. He stopped tripping over his own feet in the training yard. And when the other students at the academy looked at him with fear or curiosity or confusion, he met their gazes and smiled. Not the manic grin of the fool, but something smaller. Something real. You're different, Sakura said one day, stopping him in the hallway. Her voice was curious, not accusatory, and there was something in her eyes that looked like she was seeing him for the first time. I'm the same, Naruto said. You just weren't looking. Sakura's brow furrowed. That's not, I mean, the things they're saying about you. About Mizuki. About the shadows. Is it true? All of it? Naruto considered the question. Some of it. Probably not all of it. People like to talk. Sakura opened her mouth to ask another question, but Ino appeared at Naruto's side, her arm sliding through his, her smile bright and sharp. Sorry, Sakura, Naruto and I have plans. Maybe you can interview him another time. She pulled him away before Sakura could respond, and Naruto let her, because Ino had been doing this for days, running interference, deflecting questions, giving him space to breathe when the attention got too heavy. You don't have to protect me, he said as they walked. Ino's arm tightened around his. I'm not protecting you. I'm protecting them. You looked ready to tell her everything, and she's not ready for everything. Naruto snorted. No one's ready for everything. True. Ino glanced at him sideways, and her expression softened. But I'm getting there. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They walked through the village together, past the shops and the houses and the memorial stone where his father's name was carved, and for a moment, everything was almost normal. That night, in the palace, Kushina was waiting with news. The Third Hokage is assigning you a team, she said, her voice a careful neutral. 2 teammates and a Jonin sensei. Standard protocol for graduates. Naruto frowned. Who? One of them is Sasuke Uchiha. Kushina's expression flickered. He's the last of his clan. His brother, Itachi, killed everyone when Sasuke was 7. He's been alone almost as long as you have. Naruto's chest tightened. He knew Sasuke. Everyone knew Sasuke. The last Uchiha, the Avenger, the boy who had chosen hatred over grief and never looked back. The other is Sakura Haruno. Kushina continued. She's smart, talented, driven. She's also been competing with Ino for Sasuke's attention for years, which is going to make things complicated. What about Ino? Naruto asked. Why isn't she on my team? Kushina's smile was soft. Because you need people who will challenge you, not people who already understand you. Ino is important. But she can't be your only anchor. You need to build connections with people who don't know your secrets. People who will see you as a teammate, not a weapon or a monster. Naruto sat down heavily on the couch. And the sensei? Minato appeared from the shadows, his expression unreadable. Hatake Kakashi. Naruto's head snapped up. The copy ninja? Your student? One of them. Minato confirmed. He's complicated. He's been through more than most people go through in a lifetime. But he's also one of the most skilled shinobi in the village. If anyone can help you learn to control your power, it's him. And he's not going to be afraid of me? Minato's smile was sad. Kakashi hasn't been afraid of anything in a very long time. That's part of the problem. Naruto looked at his hands. They were steady. They were always steady now, and that scared him more than anything. Am I ready for this? He asked. For a team? For people who are going to rely on me? Kushina sat beside him and took his hands. You've been ready for this since the day you were born. You just didn't know it. She squeezed his fingers, and he felt the warmth of her chakra, the love that had sustained him through 9 years of loneliness. You're not the boy who hid in the shadows anymore, Naruto. You're the boy who stepped into the light and showed the world who he really is. And that boy is ready for anything. Naruto leaned into her, let himself be held, and tried to believe her. In the Shadow Realm, Igris stood before the doors of the palace's deepest chamber. The boy had taken another step forward. A team. A sensei. A place in the world that was not defined by what he carried, but by who he was. The general's hand rested on his sword, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel something that was not patience. Hope. Soon, the training would change. Soon, the boy would learn what it meant to command the shadows, not just wield them. Soon, the army that had been waiting for an age would have its general. But for now, the boy needed to learn to be human. And Igris, who had not been human for longer than he could remember, understood that was the hardest lesson of all. He settled back into the darkness, patient as the grave, and waited for dawn. The first time Naruto met his new team, he was late. Not on purpose. He had spent the morning with Ino, helping her train in the Yamanaka compound, and time had slipped away from him in the way it always did when they were together. But when he arrived at the training ground, panting and apologetic, he found that he was not the last one there. Sasuke was sitting against a tree, his eyes closed, his breathing even. He looked like he was meditating, but Naruto could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. The last Uchiha was never still, even when he was pretending to be. Sakura was pacing at the edge of the clearing, her brow furrowed, her lips moving silently as she ran through techniques in her head. She was nervous. Naruto could see it in the way she checked her equipment every few minutes, the way her eyes kept darting to Sasuke and then away. And in the center of the clearing, reading a book that Naruto was pretty sure was not appropriate for training grounds, was Hatake Kakashi. He was taller than Naruto expected, lean and lazy, with silver hair that defied gravity and a mask that covered everything below his eyes. His single visible eye was fixed on the pages of his book, and he didn't look up when Naruto arrived. "You're late," Kakashi said, and his voice was as lazy as his posture. "You're later," Naruto shot back. "I've been here for 3 minutes." Kakashi's eye crinkled, and Naruto realized he was smiling behind the mask. "I was testing your patience. You passed. Barely." He snapped his book shut and stood, and suddenly the laziness was gone. In its place was something sharp, something dangerous, something that made Naruto's shadow stir in his chest. "I'm Hatake Kakashi. I don't care about your hobbies, your dreams, or your tragic backstories. I care about whether you can follow orders, work as a team, and survive. This isn't the academy. If you fail here, you don't get held back. You get dead." He looked at each of them in turn, his eye lingering on Naruto for a moment longer than the others. "We're going to do a survival exercise tomorrow. You'll need to bring your equipment, your skills, and your ability to work together. If you fail, you go back to the academy. If you succeed, you become genin." He paused, and his eye crinkled again. "One more thing. I don't play favorites. I don't accept excuses. And I don't tolerate secrets that put my team at risk." He looked directly at Naruto. "If you're carrying something that could get your teammates killed, I expect to know about it. Understood?" Naruto met his gaze. "Understood." Kakashi nodded once, and then he was gone, disappearing in a swirl of leaves that left the three of them standing in the clearing, alone and off balance. "What the hell was that?" Sakura demanded. "He didn't even tell us what the exercise is." Sasuke stood, brushing off his pants. "He's testing us. Seeing how we react to uncertainty. It's a common tactic among Jonin instructors." He looked at Naruto, and for a moment, something flickered in his dark eyes. Something that might have been curiosity. "You know him?" Sasuke said. It wasn't a question. Naruto shrugged. "He was my father's student." Sasuke's expression didn't change, but Naruto saw the way his hands tightened at his sides. The way the air around him seemed to grow colder. "Your father?" Sasuke repeated. "The fourth Hokage." "My father," Naruto confirmed. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them was willing to say. Naruto's father had died a hero, his name carved into the memorial stone, his legacy the foundation of the village's strength. Sasuke's father had died in the dark, killed by his own son, his clan's name a whisper of what it had once been. "We should train," Sakura said, breaking the silence. "If we're going to pass this exercise, we need to work together. Figure out our strengths and weaknesses. Come up with a plan." Sasuke's eyes flickered to her, then away. "You can train if you want. I'm going home." He walked away without looking back, and Sakura's face fell. "He's always like that," she said, and her voice was smaller than it had been. "He doesn't let anyone get close." Naruto watched Sasuke's retreating back and thought about what it meant to carry something so heavy that you couldn't let anyone see it. He thought about the years he had spent hiding, pretending, keeping everyone at arm's length. "He's scared," Naruto said quietly. "Not of us. Of what happens if he lets people in." Sakura looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't look at him like he was the dead last or the demon or the boy with the shadows. She looked at him like he was someone who understood. "How do you know?" Naruto smiled, and it was not his academy smile. It was something older, something that had been learned in a palace that existed between worlds. "Because I was scared too. For a long time. And I'm still learning not to be." The training ground was empty when Kakashi found him. It was late, the moon high, the shadows long and dark and full of things that only Naruto could see. He was sitting in the center of the clearing, his eyes closed, his breathing even, his shadows spread around him like a pool of ink. "You're not supposed to be here," Kakashi said, appearing from the darkness with the casual ease of someone who had been moving through shadows longer than Naruto had been alive. "I'm not supposed to be a lot of things," Naruto replied, not opening his eyes. Kakashi moved to stand beside him, looking up at the moon. "Your father used to train at night. Said it was the only time the village was quiet enough to think. Your mother thought he was crazy." Naruto's eyes opened. "You knew them. Really knew them." "I was their student. Their teammate. Their friend." Kakashi's voice was flat, but there was something underneath it that sounded like grief. "I was supposed to protect them. And I failed." "You were 12 when my father died," Naruto said. "There was nothing you could have done." Kakashi was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, His voice was different. Softer. You're a lot like him, you know. Not in the way you look. In the way you carry yourself. The way you hide what you're really thinking behind something that's easier for people to handle. Naruto's shadows stirred. I'm not hiding anymore. Yes, you are. Kakashi's eye was sharp, seeing through him in a way that made Naruto's skin prickle. You're hiding behind power now instead of weakness. You think because you stopped pretending to be weak, you're being honest. But you're still hiding. You're still keeping everyone at a distance. You're just using different walls. Naruto stood, his hands clenching at his sides. You don't know anything about me. I know you have the Nine Tails sealed inside you. I know you have powers that no one in this village understands. I know you've been carrying something that would have crushed anyone else, and you've never once asked for help. Kakashi turned to face him, and for the first time, Naruto saw something in his eye that looked like understanding. I know because I did the same thing. After my father died. After Obito. After Rin. I built walls around myself, convinced that letting people in would only get them killed. And I was wrong. He reached out and put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. It was a light touch, barely there, but Naruto felt it all the way down to his bones. You don't have to carry this alone, Kakashi said. I know you think you do. I know you've been told your whole life that you're different, that you're dangerous, that you're something to be managed and controlled. But you're not. You're a kid. A kid who has been given more than anyone should have to carry. And it's okay to ask for help. Naruto's throat was tight. I don't know how. Kakashi's hand squeezed his shoulder. Then let me teach you. The same way your father taught me. The same way I should have learned, years ago, before I lost everyone I loved. He stepped back, and his hand fell away. Tomorrow we do the survival exercise. And I'm going to push you harder than you've ever been pushed. I'm going to test your limits, your skills, your ability to work with a team. And I'm going to see what you're really made of. He vanished into the shadows, leaving Naruto alone in the moonlight. But for the first time, Naruto didn't feel alone. The survival exercise was chaos. Kakashi had explained the rules: 2 bells, 3 genin, 1 hour. Anyone who didn't get a bell failed. Anyone who failed went back to the academy. And anyone who tried to eat lunch without a bell would be tied to a stump and forced to watch. It was a stupid test, Naruto thought. A test that pitted them against each other instead of teaching them to work together. A test designed to break them, not build them. He understood immediately what Kakashi was doing. Sasuke attacked first, his Sharingan blazing, his movements a blur of speed and precision that would have overwhelmed any other academy graduate. Naruto watched from the shadows, waiting, calculating. Sakura hung back, her mind working, her eyes tracking the fight. She was smart, smarter than she let anyone see, and Naruto saw the moment she realized what the test was really about. Kakashi toyed with them. He was too fast, too skilled, too experienced. Sasuke lasted 30 seconds. Sakura lasted 10. Naruto didn't engage at all. When the first hour passed, the 3 of them were sitting at the base of a tree, bruised, exhausted, and bell-less. You failed, Kakashi said, and his voice was flat. You couldn't work together. You couldn't think strategically. You couldn't even manage to land a single hit on me. You're not ready to be Genin. You're not ready to be Shinobi. You're not even ready to be on a team. He turned away, and Naruto saw Sakura's face crumple. Saw Sasuke's hands clench. Saw the hope that had been building in both of them die in their eyes. You're wrong, Naruto said. Kakashi stopped. Excuse me? Naruto stood. He was tired. He was bruised. His shadows were screaming at him to act, to show this man what he could really do, to prove once and for all that he was not weak. But that wasn't what this test was about. You're wrong about us, he said. We failed your test. But that doesn't mean we're not ready to be Shinobi. It means your test is stupid. Sasuke's head snapped up. Sakura gasped. Kakashi turned, and his eye was dangerous. You want to explain that? Naruto walked toward him, and his shadows rose around him like a cloak, dark and deep and endless. You designed this test to see if we could work together. But you designed it to fail. You gave us 2 bells for 3 people. You set us against each other. You made sure that the only way to succeed was to betray our teammates. He stopped in front of Kakashi, and for the first time, he let the mask fall completely. That's not how my father taught. That's not how shinobi should be. Shinobi are supposed to protect each other. To trust each other. To sacrifice for each other. Not to tear each other apart for a pair of bells. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bento box. It was simple, rice and fish, the same lunch he had eaten every day for years. He held it out to Kakashi. You said anyone who tried to eat without a bell would be tied to a stump. But you didn't say anything about sharing. He knelt and placed the bento box at Kakashi's feet. I'm not going to fight my teammates for your approval. I'm not going to betray them for a bell. And if that means I fail, then I fail. But I'm not going to be the kind of shinobi who wins at the expense of the people he's supposed to protect. The silence was absolute. Sakura was staring at him with wide eyes. Sasuke's expression was unreadable, but his hands had stopped shaking. Kakashi looked down at the bento box, then up at Naruto. And then, slowly, he started to laugh. It was not a cruel laugh. It was not mocking. It was the laugh of a man who had just seen something he had been waiting to see for a very long time. You're exactly like your father, he said, and his voice was warm in a way Naruto had never heard it. Exactly like him. He reached down and picked up the bento box, then pulled 2 bells from his pocket and tossed them to Naruto. You pass. Naruto caught the bells stunned. What? The test was never about the bells. It was about seeing if you understood what it meant to be a shinobi. Your father's generation, the generation that built this village, they understood that the mission isn't everything. That your comrades matter more than your orders. That the shinobi who breaks the rules is trash, but the shinobi who abandons his comrades is worse than trash. He looked at the 3 of them, and for the first time, Naruto saw something in his eye that looked like hope. You passed, Naruto. All of you. Because you understood what your father understood. What Obito understood. What I forgot for a very long time. He tucked the bento box into his vest and turned away. Team 7 is officially formed. Meet me at the training ground tomorrow at 7 a.m. And Naruto. He paused, glancing back. Nice speech. But next time, try not to get yourself killed making it. He vanished, and the clearing was quiet again. Sasuke was the first to move. He walked over to Naruto, looked at the bells in his hand, and then at Naruto's face. You're not what I expected, he said. Naruto shrugged. I'm not what a lot of people expected. Sasuke's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. He walked away, and Sakura hurried after him, leaving Naruto alone in the clearing. He looked at the bells in his hand, at the shadows still clinging to his feet, at the sky that was turning gold with the setting sun. You did well, Minato said in his mind. I'm proud of you. So proud, Kushina added, and her voice was thick with tears. So proud. Naruto closed his eyes and let the warmth of their pride wash over him. He was ready. For the first time in his life, he was truly, completely ready. That night, Naruto dreamed of the woman with white hair. She was waiting for him in the garden again, but the garden had changed. The flowers were wilting, their petals falling, their colors fading to gray. The sky above was dark, the stars obscured by clouds that moved with a purpose that had nothing to do with wind. You're coming closer, she said, and her voice was the same, distant, patient, terrible. The seals are weakening. The shadows are growing. Soon you will be what you were always meant to be. Naruto faced her, and he did not look away. What am I meant to be? She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was not a cruel smile. It was the smile of something that had been waiting for an eternity, and was finally seeing the end. Mine, she said. You were always meant to be mine. The garden dissolved, and Naruto fell. He woke in his bed, his shadows thrashing, his heart pounding, his parents' voices calling to him from the palace. But he did not answer them. He lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in his life, he was afraid. Not of the woman. Not of what she wanted. Not of the power he carried or the fate that was waiting for him. He was afraid of what he might have to become to stop her. 3 months passed. 3 months of training, of missions, of learning to work with a team that had started as strangers and slowly, painfully, become something more. 3 months of pushing his limits, testing his power, discovering what he was capable of when he stopped hiding. 3 months of watching the sky and waiting for the storm to break. It came on a night when the moon was full, when the village was quiet, when Naruto was alone in his apartment, meditating in the darkness that had become his sanctuary. He felt her before he saw her. A presence at the edge of his awareness, vast and cold and patient. The same presence that had haunted his dreams since before he could remember. Kaguya, he said, not opening his eyes. She appeared in the center of his room, her white hair flowing in a wind that didn't exist, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his shadows scream. "You know my name," she said. "Good. That makes this easier." Naruto opened his eyes and looked at her. She was beautiful in the way that stars were beautiful, distant, cold, indifferent to the lives that burned in their light. Her skin was pale, her features sharp, her presence a weight that pressed against his soul like a stone against a blade. "What do you want?" She smiled, and it was the smile of something that had been waiting for an eternity. "What I have always wanted. You. The power you carry. The future you represent. You are the key, Naruto Uzumaki. The key to everything I have been waiting for." She stepped closer, and the shadows in the room recoiled from her, unable to touch her, unable to even approach. "The fox inside you. The shadows you command. The gifts that were given to you by a being that had no right to interfere. All of it was meant for me. All of it was meant to return to me. And now, after so long, I am here to collect." Naruto stood. His body was moving before he thought about it, his shadows rising around him, his chakra blazing to life in his chest. "I'm not yours," he said. "I never was. Whatever you plan for me, whatever destiny you think I have, it's mine. Not yours. Mine." Kaguya's smile didn't waver. "You are a child. A child playing with powers he does not understand. The shadows you command, they are mine. The chakra you wield, it is mine. The very soul that burns in your chest, it was stolen from me, given to you by a being that had no right to touch what was mine." She raised her hand, and the shadows around Naruto froze. They stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped existing as anything but dead things in the presence of something older and darker than they had ever known. "You think you are the Shadow Monarch? You are nothing. A shadow of a shadow. A child playing at being a king. The true sovereign of shadows is not you, Naruto Uzumaki. It never was." Naruto felt his control slipping. The shadows that had answered him for so long, that had become a part of him, were turning away. They were leaving him, flowing toward Kaguya like water seeking its level, drawn to something that was more real, more ancient, more true than he could ever be. "No," he thought. "No, this is not how it ends." He reached for his shadows, for the power that had been given to him, for the strength that had been forged in 9 years of training, of hiding, of learning to carry what no one else could carry. And in the depths of his soul, in the palace that had been his sanctuary since before he could remember, something woke. The palace was burning. Naruto stood in the great hall where his parents had first held him, watching the flames climb the walls, watching the shadows that had protected him for so long turn against him. Kushina was screaming somewhere in the distance. Minato was fighting, his seals blazing, his chakra burning bright against the darkness that was consuming them. And in the center of it all, Igra stood. The general's armor was cracked, his sword drawn, his form flickering at the edges like a candle in the wind. But his eyes, those burning embers that had watched Naruto for so long, were fixed on him with an intensity that cut through the chaos. "You are the sovereign," Igra said, and his voice was the first time Naruto had ever heard it. It was the sound of swords crossing, of armies marching, of something that had been waiting for this moment since the beginning of time. "Not because you were given power. Not because you were chosen. You are the sovereign because you chose to be. Because you carried the weight when no one else could. Because you protected when everyone else destroyed." He raised his sword, and the shadows around him blazed to life, not retreating, not surrendering, but answering. "The shadows do not belong to Kaguya. They never did. They belong to the one who commands them. The one who earns them. The one who carries them like a crown and a burden and a promise. And that is you, Naruto Uzumaki. That has always been you." Naruto looked at the palace, at the flames, at the shadows that were tearing apart everything he had built. He looked at his mother, fighting to reach him. His father, holding back the darkness with nothing but his will. And the general, who had waited an eternity for this moment. "What do I do?" he asked. Igra's smile was the first smile Naruto had ever seen on his face. It was terrible and beautiful and full of something that looked like pride. "You remember who you are." Naruto opened his eyes. Kaguya was still there, still smiling, still reaching for him with hands that were older than the world. The shadows had abandoned him, flowing toward her like water, leaving him bare and alone in the center of his room. "You see?" she said, and her voice was almost gentle. "You were never meant to carry this. It was always too heavy for you. Let me take it. Let me take the burden. Let me be what you were meant to be." Naruto looked at her hands. They were beautiful, pale and perfect, the hands of something that had never known doubt or fear or failure. He thought about his mother's hands, calloused and warm. His father's hands, steady and sure. Ino's hands, small and fierce, holding his in an empty classroom. Iruka's hands, trembling as they wrapped around him in the training yard. Kakashi's hand on his shoulder, light as a feather, heavy as a promise. He thought about the weight he had carried for 9 years. The loneliness. The fear. The endless, exhausting work of being something that no one wanted him to be. No, he said. Kaguya's smile flickered. No? Naruto stepped forward, and the shadows around him stirred. Not the shadows that had abandoned him, but something deeper. Something that had been there since the night he was born, waiting for this moment. This power is mine, he said. Not because you gave it to me. Not because I was chosen for it. It's mine because I carried it. Because I suffered for it. Because I spent 9 years learning to control it, to understand it, to make it a part of me. He stepped forward again, and the shadows rose around him. Not the shadows that had answered Kaguya. Those were dead, empty, hollow. These were different. These were his shadows, forged in 9 years of training, 9 years of hiding, 9 years of becoming something that no one had expected him to be. You want to know what I am? He asked. I'm not the Shadow Monarch. I'm not the Nine-Tails Container. I'm not the son of the Fourth Hokage or the last Uzumaki or any of the things you think I am. He raised his hand, and the shadows answered. They wrapped around him like armor, like a cloak, like the weight he had been carrying since he was born. I'm the boy who was given everything and chose to be nothing. The boy who was told he was a monster and decided to be a person. The boy who carried a weight that would have broken anyone else and never once asked why it had to be him. The shadows around Kaguya started to crack. Not break, not yet, but shift. They were no longer flowing toward her. They were turning, drawn by something that was not power, not strength, not anything she could control. I'm Naruto, he said. Just Naruto. And you can't have me. You can't have my power. You can't have my shadows. You can't have anything that I haven't chosen to give. He closed his hand, and the shadows exploded. Kaguya screamed. Not in pain, she was beyond pain, beyond anything that mortal weapons could inflict. But for the first time in 1,000 years she was afraid. Not of the shadows. Not of the power. But of the boy standing in front of her, his eyes blazing, his hands steady, his soul burning with a light that no darkness could touch. You think this is over? She snarled, and her voice was not gentle now. It was the voice of something that had been waiting too long, that had been denied too often, that would not be stopped by a child's defiance. This is not over, Naruto Uzumaki. This is the beginning. I have waited millennia for this moment. I can wait a little longer. But you will come to me. You will seek me out. Because the power you carry, the shadows you command, the destiny that was written in your soul before you were born, it will not let you rest. It will not let you forget. And when you come, I will be waiting. She vanished, and the shadows in the room collapsed. Naruto stood in the center of his apartment, his shadows quiet, his hands shaking, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Naruto. Kushina's voice was soft, trembling. Naruto, are you okay? He looked at his hands. They were shaking. They were always shaking, after moments like this. After he let the mask fall and showed the world what he really was. But this time, the shaking was different. This time, it was not fear. It was not exhaustion. It was something he had never felt before. Relief. I'm okay, he said, and for the first time, he meant it. The sun was rising over Konoha when Naruto stepped out of his apartment. The village was waking, the streets filling with people who had no idea what had happened in the night. Merchants opening their shops. Shinobi heading to training. Children running to the academy, their laughter sharp and bright in the morning air. Normal. The village was normal. And for the first time, Naruto thought he might be too. He walked through the streets, his shadows quiet at his feet, his chakra calm, his mind still. He passed the ramen stand where Iruka had taken him after the Mizuki incident. The training ground where Kakashi had tested them. The Yamanaka flower shop, where Ino was already working, her hair bright in the morning sun. She looked up when he passed, and her smile was the first real thing he had seen all night. You look terrible, she said. He laughed. It was a real laugh, light and easy, nothing like the manic grin he had worn for 9 years. Rough night. Ino's eyes sharpened. How rough? He thought about Kaguya. About the shadows turning against him. About the moment when he had reached into his soul and found something that was not power, not destiny, not any of the things he had been given. Rough, he admitted. But I'm okay. I think I'm finally okay. Ino looked at him for a long moment, and he saw her father's training in her eyes, the years of learning to read people, to see what they were hiding. You're not hiding anymore, she said. It wasn't a question. Naruto shook his head. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending to be something I'm not. I'm just going to be Naruto. Whatever that means. Ino's smile was the warmest thing he had ever seen. That's all I ever wanted. She reached across the counter and took his hand, and he let her. Her fingers were cool against his, steady, sure. You're not alone, she said. You know that, right? Whatever happens, whatever's coming, you're not alone. He squeezed her hand and felt the weight on his shoulders lift, just a little. Not gone. It would never be gone. The fox was still inside him. The shadows were still waiting. Kaguya was still out there, patient and hungry, waiting for the moment when he would come to her. But for now, in this moment, with the sun rising over the village his parents had died to protect, and a girl who saw him for what he was holding his hand, he was not alone. He was Naruto. And that was enough. In the palace, Kushina was crying. Not sad tears. Not the tears she had shed for 9 years, watching her son struggle and hide and carry a weight that should have been hers. These were different. These were the tears of a mother who had just watched her son become something she had always known he could be. Minato stood behind her, his arms around her waist, his chin on her shoulder. His eyes were dry, but his hands were shaking. He's going to be okay, Kushina whispered. He's going to be okay. Minato pressed a kiss to her hair. He's more than okay. He's exactly what we always knew he would be. In the shadows of the palace, in the room that had no doors, Igris stood alone. His armor was whole again, his sword at his side, his eyes fixed on the distance that separated the palace from the waking world. The boy had chosen. He had faced the darkness and refused to be consumed. He had stood against a goddess and held his ground. He had become what he was always meant to be. But the war was not over. Kaguya was still out there, still waiting, still patient. And the power that had been given to Naruto was not just a gift. It was a responsibility. A burden. A promise. Igris's hand found his sword, and in the darkness of the Shadow Realm, he smiled. The boy was ready. And when the time came, the shadows would answer. They would always answer. Naruto stood at the edge of the village, looking out at the forest that stretched to the horizon. His shadows were quiet at his feet, his chakra steady, his mind clear. He was not what anyone had expected him to be. Not the monster they had feared. Not the hero they had hoped for. Not the god that had been promised. He was just Naruto. A boy who had been given everything and chosen to be nothing. A boy who had carried a weight that would have crushed anyone else and found a way to stand. A boy who had faced a goddess and said no. He looked at his hands. They were steady. That didn't scare him anymore. He had work to do. Training. Missions. A team that was waiting for him, 3 people who had become something more than teammates in the last 3 months. A village that was slowly, painfully, learning to see him as something other than a monster. A future that was uncertain, dangerous, full of threats he could not yet understand. But he was ready. For the first time in his life, he was ready. He turned away from the horizon and walked back into the village, into the morning, into the life that was waiting for him. His shadows followed, quiet and patient, and somewhere in the depths of his soul, a palace stood waiting. And in that palace, his parents were watching. His mother was smiling, her eyes bright with tears. His father was nodding, steady and sure, the way he had always been. And in the shadows, a general was waiting, patient as the grave, ready for the war that was coming. But for now, Naruto walked through the streets of his village, past the shops and the houses and the people who were slowly learning to see him, and he did not look back. He was not a god. He was not a monster. He was not a weapon or a tool or a destiny waiting to be fulfilled. He was Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who chose to be human. And that, he thought, was the most powerful thing in the world. The end. For now. Afterward. This story was never about power. It was about a boy who was given everything and chose to be nothing. A boy who carried the weight of the world and never once asked why it had to be him. A boy who stood in the darkness and found a way to be human. Naruto's journey is not over. Kaguya is still out there. The shadows are still waiting. The war that was promised is still coming. But for now, for this moment, he is exactly where he needs to be. Standing in the light. Choosing to be human. Becoming something that no power, no destiny, no goddess can take away. He is Naruto. And that is enough. This response is AI generated, for reference only. Next. Sovereign of Shadows and Stars. Book 2, The Weight of Crowns. The nightmares started 3 weeks after Kaguya's visit. They were not the dreams Naruto remembered from his childhood, the shapeless fears, the formless dread, the vague sense of something waiting in the darkness. These were different. These were specific. He was standing in a field of white flowers that bloomed beneath a moon that never moved. The sky was wrong, too dark, too still, too empty. No stars. No clouds. Just the moon, hanging overhead like an eye that had been watching for 1,000 years. And in the center of the field, waiting, was Kaguya. She never moved. Never spoke. She simply stood, her white hair drifting in a wind that didn't exist, her eyes fixed on him with impatience that was more terrifying than any anger. She was waiting for him to come closer. Waiting for him to make the first move. Waiting for him to fulfill whatever destiny she had written for him before he was born. He always woke before he reached her. Always gasping, always shaking, always reaching for shadows that had retreated so far he could barely feel them. Again? Kushina's voice was soft, weary. She had been watching him wake from these dreams for 3 weeks, and the circles under her eyes were almost as dark as his. Naruto sat up in the darkness of his apartment, his hands pressed flat against his knees, forcing them to be still. Same dream. Same field. Same woman. He didn't say her name. In the waking world, he couldn't bring himself to say it. Kaguya. The name felt like poison in his mouth, like something that would stick to his tongue and never wash out. Minato appeared beside his wife, his expression troubled. The seals I placed when you were born, they're weakening. I can feel it. The shadows, too. Something is pulling at them. Something that wants to take them back. Naruto's jaw tightened. She said the shadows were hers? That I was just borrowing them. She was wrong. Minato's voice was firm, but there was something underneath it that sounded like uncertainty. The shadows are yours. They chose you. But Kaguya, she has a connection to them. A claim that predates your birth. And she's using that claim to reach you. Naruto stood. His body ached with exhaustion, 3 weeks of broken sleep, 3 weeks of fighting shadows that were no longer entirely his own, 3 weeks of pretending to be fine when every night he was falling apart. What do I do? Minato and Kushina exchanged a look. It was the look they had been exchanging for 9 years, the look that meant they were deciding how much of the truth to give him. The village has records, Minato said slowly. Scrolls that predate the founding of Konoha. Information about the Sage of Six Paths, about the origins of chakra, about the woman who was sealed away 1,000 years ago. Kaguya, Naruto said. Kaguya, Minato confirmed. If you want to understand what she wants, why she chose you, how to stop her, the answers are in those scrolls. But they're not easy to access. The Third Hokage keeps them sealed for a reason. Naruto pulled his shirt over his head, his movements mechanical, automatic. Then I'll ask him. He won't give them to you, Kushina said quietly. Not because he doesn't trust you. Because the knowledge in those scrolls changes people. It makes them see the world differently. Makes them see themselves differently. Your father read them once. He was never the same after. Naruto paused, his hand on the door. He looked back at his parents, at the ghosts who had guided him, protected him, loved him for 9 years. What did they show him? Minato's expression was distant, lost in a memory that was older than his death. They showed him that the world is broken. That the cycle of pain and violence we live in, the wars, the hatred, the endless death, it's not natural. It was created. Designed. A system built by beings who saw humanity as something to be used, not something to be protected. He looked at Naruto, and for the first time, his father's eyes held something that looked like fear. They showed him that the only way to fix it was to become something more than human. The Hokage's office was quiet when Naruto arrived. Hiruzen was alone, which was unusual. There were always ANBU in the shadows, advisors in the wings, a constant hum of politics and power that filled the room like smoke. But this morning, the office was empty. Just the old man, sitting behind his desk, a scroll unrolled before him that he did not seem to be reading. I was wondering when you would come, Hiruzen said without looking up. The reports from your apartment have been concerning. The ANBU say the shadows have been acting strangely. Moving when they shouldn't. Reaching for things that aren't there. Naruto sat across from him, not waiting for an invitation. Kaguya came to see me. 3 weeks ago. She said the shadows were hers. Said I was just borrowing them. Said she would be waiting for me to come to her. The scroll in Hiruzen's hands trembled. Just a little. Just enough for Naruto to see. You know about her, Naruto said. It wasn't a question. Hiruzen set the scroll down and looked at him. His face was older than Naruto remembered, the lines deeper, the eyes more tired. He looked like a man who had been carrying a secret for too long and was finally being asked to put it down. I know about her, he confirmed. I know what she is. What she wants. What she has been waiting for 1,000 years. I know because your father told me. Before you were born. Before the 9 tails. Before everything. He reached into his desk and pulled out a scroll that was older than any Naruto had ever seen. The paper was yellowed, the edges crumbling, the seals on its surface so faded they were almost invisible. But the chakra emanating from it was unmistakable. Ancient. Powerful. Alive. This is the Uzumaki clan's account of the Sage of Six Paths, Hiruzen said, placing the scroll on the desk between them. It was written 600 years ago, transcribed from oral traditions that date back to the sage's own disciples. It contains everything we know about Kaguya Otsutsuki. About her sons. About the chakra she brought to this world. And about the prophecy that has haunted every generation since she was sealed. He pushed the scroll toward Naruto, and for a moment, Naruto saw something in the old man's eyes that looked like relief. I was going to give this to you when you were older. When you were ready. But I think maybe you've been ready for longer than any of us knew. Naruto's hand hovered over the scroll. He could feel the chakra pulsing beneath the paper, old and deep and patient. Waiting. What's in it? He asked. Hiruzen's smile was sad. The truth. About your power. About your destiny. About the choice that has been waiting for you since before you were born. He leaned back in his chair, and for a moment, he was not the third Hokage. He was just an old man, tired and afraid, passing a burden he had carried for too long to someone who was strong enough to carry it. Read it, he said. And then come back. We'll talk about what comes next. Naruto read the scroll in the Hokage's private library, surrounded by shelves of books that had been collected over generations, by shinobi who had tried to understand the world they lived in and found only more questions. The scroll was not long. It was not written in the formal, careful language of the historical records he had read in the academy. It was rough, raw, the words of people who had seen something terrible and were trying, desperately, to make sense of it. In the time before the nations, before the villages, before the shinobi walked the earth, there was a woman who fell from the sky. She was not like us. Her skin was pale as the moon, her hair white as snow, her eyes empty of everything except hunger. She came from a place beyond the stars, from a world that had consumed itself and was reaching for more. She ate the fruit of the god tree, and in doing so, she became something that was not human. She became chakra itself. The life force of the world, twisted and shaped and controlled by a hunger that could never be sated. Her sons were born human. They were born with her power, with her blood, with the weight of her sin pressing down on their souls. And they chose to fight her. To seal her. To give the world a chance to be something other than her garden. But before she was sealed, she spoke. And her words were not the words of a mother. They were the words of a goddess who had been denied what she was owed. My sons have betrayed me. But the world will not forget. The chakra that flows through every living thing is mine. It will always be mine. And one day, it will return to me. One day, a child will be born who carries the weight of my blood, my power, my hunger. And that child will come to me. Will become me. Will make the world whole again. Naruto's hands were shaking when he finished the scroll. He read it again. Then again. Each time, the words seemed to shift, to change, to reveal new meanings that had been hidden beneath the surface. The child will come to me. Will become me. Will make the world whole again. He thought about Kaguya's smile. About the way she had looked at him, not like a person, but like something she had lost and was finally finding again. About the words she had spoken in his dreams, over and over, like a prayer he could not escape. You were always meant to be mine. She thinks I'm going to become her, he said aloud. His voice sounded strange in the quiet of the library. Small. Young. She thinks I'm going to carry her power, her hunger, her everything. And she's waiting for me to come to her. To become what she always wanted her sons to be. He looked at the scroll, at the faded seals, at the chakra that pulsed beneath the paper like a heartbeat. But she's wrong, he said, and his voice was steadier now. I'm not going to become her. I'm not going to be anyone's tool. I'm going to be Naruto. Just Naruto. The scroll was silent. The library was silent. But somewhere in the depths of his soul, in the palace that had been his sanctuary for 9 years, something stirred. And for the first time, it was not Kaguya's presence he felt. It was something else. Something that had been waiting for this moment, since the scroll was written. Something that was patient and old and full of a hope that had not died in 1,000 years. Good, a voice whispered. Then perhaps you are the one we have been waiting for. The palace had changed. Naruto stood in the great hall where his parents had first held him, but the hall was different now. The walls were higher, the ceilings more distant, the shadows deeper. And in the center of the hall, where the table had been, there was a throne. It was not a comfortable throne. It was not the kind of throne that invited rest. It was black stone, carved with shadows that moved in the torchlight, its edges sharp, its presence heavy. It was the throne of something that had been waiting for a king for a very long time. "What is this?" Naruto asked. His parents stood beside him, but they were different too. More solid. More present. More real than they had been before. Kushina's hair was brighter, her eyes sharper. Minato's presence was heavier, his chakra a steady warmth that filled the hall like sunlight. "This is what you've been building," Minato said. "Every night you came here. Every lesson you learned. Every choice you made. You've been building a kingdom, Naruto. A kingdom of shadows and stars, of memory and will, of everything you are and everything you could become." Kushina took his hand. Her fingers were warm, real, alive in a way they had never been before. "And now you have to decide what kind of king you're going to be." Naruto looked at the throne. At the shadows that swirled around its base, patient and waiting. At the stars that had appeared in the ceiling of the hall, bright and distant and full of possibilities he could not name. "I don't want to be a king," he said. "I don't want to rule anything. I just want to protect people. The way father protected the village. The way mother protected me." Minato's smile was gentle. "That's exactly what a king does, Naruto. A king doesn't sit on a throne and give orders. A king stands between his people and the darkness and says, 'You will not pass.' A king carries a weight that no one else can carry, not because he wants to, but because someone has to." He placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder, and for a moment, the weight of it was almost too much to bear. "You've been carrying that weight your whole life. The fox. The shadows. The loneliness. The fear. You've been carrying it because no one else could. And you've never once asked why it had to be you." Naruto's throat was tight. "Why did it have to be me?" Kushina's arms wrapped around him, and for a moment, he was 3 years old again, standing in this hall for the first time, finally finding his way home. "Because you were strong enough," she whispered. "Because you were kind enough. Because you were brave enough to keep going when everyone else would have broken. Because you are our son, and we have never, not once, regretted the choice we made to bring you into this world." She pulled back and looked at him, her eyes bright with tears. "You are not Kaguya's. You are not the fox's. You are not the shadows or the villages or anyone else's. You are yours, Naruto. You have always been yours. And whatever you choose to become, whatever path you walk, we will be here. Watching. Waiting. Loving you." Naruto looked at the throne. At the shadows. At the stars that were burning brighter now, filling the hall with light that was not quite light, with warmth that was not quite warmth. He walked toward it. Not because he wanted to. Not because he was ready. But because it was there, and it was his, and he was tired of running from things that had been waiting for him since before he was born. He sat. The throne accepted him. Not with a jolt of power, not with a rush of understanding. Simply, settled. The way a key settles into a lock. The way a hand settles into a glove. The way a king settles into a crown that has been waiting for him for a very long time. And in the shadows of the hall, Igris appeared. The general was no longer flickering at the edges. He was solid, real, present in a way he had never been before. His armor was whole, his sword bright, his eyes burning with a fire that had not dimmed in 1,000 years. "Sovereign," Igris said, and his voice was the sound of armies forming, of walls rising, of something that had been waiting for this moment since the beginning of time. "The shadows are yours. The army is yours. The war that is coming, it is yours to fight, or yours to end. What would you have us do?" Naruto looked at the general. At his parents. At the hall that had grown from a room into a kingdom. He thought about Kaguya, waiting in her field of white flowers. He thought about the scroll, with its prophecy of hunger and return. He thought about the village outside his apartment walls, the village his parents had died to protect, the village that was slowly, painfully learning to see him as something other than a monster. "Protect," he said. "That's all I've ever wanted to do. Protect the people I love. Protect the village that took everything from me and gave me nothing. Protect a world that was built on a lie and deserves a chance to become something true." He stood, and the shadows rose with him. Not the shadows that had answered Kaguya. Those were dead, empty, hollow. These were his shadows. Shadows he had earned. Shadows he had carried. Shadows that would answer him until the end of time. "We're not going to fight Kaguya," he said. "Not yet. We're not ready. And if we fight her now, we lose. Not because we're not strong enough. Because we're not whole enough. He looked at Igris, and for the first time, he saw something in the general's eyes that looked like understanding. We're going to become whole. We're going to train. We're going to grow. We're going to build something worth protecting. And when Kaguya comes, when she finally comes to take what she thinks is hers, we're going to be ready. Not because we're stronger. Because we're more. He walked to the doors of the hall, and they opened before him, revealing a palace that stretched into infinity, a kingdom that was built on 9 years of loneliness and fear and the stubborn, impossible choice to keep going. Let her wait, Naruto said. Let her watch. Let her dream of the day I come to her. Because I'm not going to come. Not until I'm ready. Not until I become something she can't touch. Something she can't take. Something she can't break. He stepped through the doors, into the palace that was his, into the kingdom that was his, into the future that was his to build. And when I come, he said, his voice echoing through halls that had been waiting for this moment since before he was born. I'm not coming to become her. I'm coming to end her. In the waking world, Naruto opened his eyes. He was still in the Hokage's library, the scroll still open before him, the seals on its surface pulsing with a light that seemed dimmer than before. His shadows were quiet at his feet, but they were different now. More solid. More present. More his. He stood, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he did not shake. He walked out of the library, past the Hokage's office, past the Anbu who watched him with eyes that were no longer calculating, no longer afraid. He walked through the streets of Konoha, past the shops and the houses and the people who were slowly, painfully learning to see him. He walked until he reached the Yamanaka flower shop, where Ino was arranging flowers in the window, her hands quick and sure, her hair bright in the afternoon sun. She looked up when he approached, and her smile was the first real thing he had seen all day. You look better, she said. He leaned against the window frame, his shadows pooling at his feet, his chakra steady, his mind clear. I figured something out, he said. About what I am. What I'm supposed to do. Ino set down the flowers and gave him her full attention. And? He thought about the throne. The shadows. The war that was coming. He thought about Kaguya, waiting in her field of white flowers, patient and hungry and sure of a destiny that he was going to break. I'm not a weapon, he said. I'm not a tool. I'm not a destiny waiting to be fulfilled. I'm just me. And that's enough. That's always been enough. Ino's smile widened. Took you long enough to figure that out. He laughed, and it was real, light, free in a way he had never been before. Yeah. Took me long enough. He pushed off from the window frame, and for a moment, he thought about telling her everything. About the throne. About the prophecy. About Kaguya and the shadows and the war that was coming. But he looked at her face, at her smile, at the way the afternoon light caught in her hair, and he decided that some things could wait. I'm going to be training, he said instead. A lot. For a while. Kakashi's been helping me figure out some things. About my chakra. About my shadows. About the fox. Ino's expression flickered. How long? He shrugged. As long as it takes. She was quiet for a moment, and he saw her father's training in her eyes, the years of learning to read people, to see what they were hiding. You're not going to tell me what's going on, are you? He shook his head. Not yet. Not until I understand it myself. But when I do. He met her eyes, and for the first time, he let her see the weight he was carrying. Not all of it. Just enough. When I do, I'll tell you everything. I promise. Ino studied him for a long moment. Then she reached through the window and took his hand. You better, she said. Because if you think I'm letting you carry whatever this is alone, you're even stupider than you pretend to be. He squeezed her hand, and for a moment, everything was almost normal. Almost. That night, Naruto sat in his apartment, his eyes closed, his breathing even, his shadows spread around him like a pool of ink. In the palace, Igris was waiting. In his mind, his parents were watching. And in the depths of his soul, something was stirring. The fox. He had felt Kurama's presence his whole life, a weight in his chest, a heat in his blood, a constant, gnawing hunger that was not his own. But he had never reached for it. Never tried to understand it. Never done anything except contain it, and control it, and keep it from destroying everything he loved. Now, sitting in the darkness of his apartment, with the shadows pulling at his feet and the weight of a prophecy pressing down on his shoulders, he decided it was time to change that. Are you sure? Kushina's voice was soft, worried. Kurama is not like the shadows. He's not like anything you've faced before. He's been waiting for this moment for 9 years. Waiting for you to be weak enough to reach for him. I'm not weak, Naruto thought back. I'm not weak anymore. I haven't been weak since the night I was born. He closed his eyes and let himself fall. The place where Kurama lived was not the palace. It was a sewer. Dark, damp, filled with water that smelled of rust and something older, something that had been rotting for 1,000 years. Naruto stood on a metal grate, his feet bare, his clothes gone, his shadows nowhere to be found. And in front of him, behind bars that should not have held anything, was the Nine Tails. He was huge. Naruto had known he would be huge. He had seen the pictures, read the descriptions, heard the stories of the night the fox had nearly destroyed the village. But knowing and seeing were different things. The fox's fur was red as blood, his eyes burning with a hatred that was older than the village, older than the nations, older than anything Naruto had ever known. And he was laughing. So the little vessel finally comes to visit, Kurama said, and his voice was the sound of mountains breaking, of forests burning, of everything Naruto had ever feared made manifest. I wondered how long it would take. 3 weeks of nightmares, and suddenly you're brave enough to face me. Naruto stood at the edge of the cage, his hands steady, his heart pounding, his mind clear. I'm not here to fight you. Kurama's laugh was a blade. Then why are you here, little vessel? To beg for my power? To ask the monster inside you to save you from the goddess who wants to consume you? To pretend that 9 years of hatred can be undone by a few pretty words? Naruto shook his head. I'm here to talk. The laughter stopped. Kurama's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, something flickered in their depths that was not hatred. Something that looked almost like surprise. Talk. Talk. Naruto sat down on the grate cross-legged, his hands on his knees. You've been inside me my whole life. You've seen everything I've seen. Felt everything I've felt. You know what I've been through. What I've become. What I'm trying to become. He looked up at the fox, and for the first time, he did not see a monster. He saw something old. Something tired. Something that had been fighting for so long it had forgotten what it was fighting for. You were there when Kaguya came, Naruto said. You felt her. The same way I felt her. And you were afraid. Kurama's fur bristled. I am not afraid of anything. You were afraid, Naruto said again, and his voice was gentle. Not of her. Of what she wants. Of what she'll do to this world if she gets what she's looking for. You were afraid because you know what she is. What she's capable of. Because you were there, 1,000 years ago, when her son sealed her away. And you remember. The silence stretched between them, heavy and cold. Naruto waited, patient as stone, and after a long moment, Kurama looked away. I remember, the fox said, and his voice was different now. Quieter. Older. I remember the god tree. I remember the fruit she ate. I remember the hunger that consumed her, that turned her from a woman into something that could never be satisfied. I remember what she did to this world. What she would have done, if her sons had not stopped her. He looked back at Naruto, and his eyes were not burning. They were tired. And I remember what they did to me. After she was sealed. Her sons, the sage and his brother, they took her chakra and divided it. 9 pieces. 9 beasts. 9 prisons for a power that was never meant to be contained. I was the strongest. The brightest. The closest to what she had been. And I was the one they feared most. Naruto listened. He did not interrupt. He did not argue. He simply sat, and he listened, and he let the fox speak words that had been waiting to be spoken for 1,000 years. They called me a demon. A monster. A force of destruction that could never be controlled. They sealed me again and again, in prisons that were not strong enough, in vessels that were not worthy, in bodies that broke under the weight of what I was. And every time I hated. Every time I burned. Every time I swore that when I was free, I would destroy everything they had built. He paused, and his eyes met Naruto's. And then I was sealed in you. A child. A newborn, barely breathing, too small to understand what was being done to him. And I thought, this is the end. This is what they think of me. A prison so weak it will break in a day, a vessel so fragile it will shatter in a week. But it didn't break, Naruto said quietly. I didn't break. Kurama's laugh was soft, almost gentle. No. You didn't break. 9 years of hatred, of loneliness, of a weight that would have crushed anyone else, and you didn't break. You bent. You hid. You pretended to be something you were not. But you did not break. He looked at Naruto, and for the first time, there was something in his eyes that was not hatred. You are not what I expected, Naruto Uzumaki. You are not what any of them expected. And perhaps. He paused, and something in his expression shifted. Perhaps that is why you are the one who can end this. Not Kaguya's vessel. Not the sage's weapon. Not the demon's cage. Something else. Something new. Naruto stood. He walked to the bars of the cage, and for a moment, he thought about reaching through them. About touching the fur of the creature that had been inside him his whole life. About closing the distance that had been there since before he was born. I'm not going to ask you for your power, he said. I'm not going to beg you to help me fight Kaguya. I'm not going to pretend that 9 years of hatred can be undone by one conversation. He looked up at Kurama, and his eyes were steady. But I want you to know that I'm not going to keep you in here forever. When this is over, when Kaguya is dealt with, when the world is safe, when I don't need to carry you anymore, I'm going to let you go. Not because you're a weapon I can use. Because you deserve to be free. The same way I deserve to be free. The same way everyone who's been carrying something they didn't choose deserves to put it down. Kurama was silent for a long, long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Not quiet. Not gentle. But not the voice of hatred either. You are a strange child, Naruto Uzumaki. Strange and foolish and perhaps, exactly what this broken world needs. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, the cage seemed smaller. The water seemed clearer. The darkness seemed less absolute. Go, the fox said. You have training to do. Shadows to command. A world to save. But know this, when the time comes, when Kaguya comes for you, I will be here. Not because you asked. Not because I want to help you. But because I want to be free. And she is the only thing standing in the way of that freedom. Naruto nodded. He turned and walked away, back toward the light that was waiting at the end of the sewer, back toward the world that was waiting for him to save it. And behind him, in the darkness of his cage, Kurama opened his eyes and watched the boy go. Strange child, he thought. Strange and foolish and perhaps, the only one who could ever have understood. Naruto opened his eyes in his apartment. The shadows were there, waiting. His parents were there, watching. And in his chest, where the weight of the fox had always been a burden, there was something new. Not acceptance. Not friendship. Not anything so simple. But something that felt, perhaps, like the beginning of understanding. He stood, and for the first time in his life, he did not feel like he was carrying anything at all. He felt like he was ready. The training ground was empty when Naruto arrived. It was the same ground where Kakashi had tested them, where Naruto had stood in the shadows and watched his teammates fail and learned, finally, that winning wasn't about being stronger than anyone else. It was about being more patient, more kind, more willing to lose if losing meant protecting the people you loved. He sat in the center of the clearing, his legs crossed, his hands on his knees, his eyes closed. The morning sun was warm on his face, the birds were singing in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, the village was waking up to another day of normal life. Normal life. He had never had normal life. He had been given powers he didn't ask for, carried burdens he didn't choose, faced threats that no child should ever have to face. But sitting in the clearing, with the sun on his face and the shadows quiet at his feet, he thought that perhaps normal was overrated. You're early. Kakashi's voice came from behind him, soft and lazy, the voice of a man who had been watching for longer than Naruto had been sitting. You're late, Naruto said, not opening his eyes. As usual. Kakashi moved to stand beside him, his footsteps silent on the grass. You spoke to the fox. It wasn't a question. Naruto opened his eyes and looked up at his sensei. Kakashi's mask was in place, his book in his hand, his posture lazy. But his eye was sharp, watching Naruto with an intensity that had nothing to do with the training exercise they were supposed to be doing. I spoke to the fox. Naruto confirmed. He's not what I expected. Kakashi sat down beside him, his movements slow, deliberate. What did you expect? Naruto thought about it. Hatred. Rage. A monster that wanted nothing but destruction. The thing the village always said he was. And what did you find? Naruto looked at his hands. They were steady. They were always steady now, and that didn't scare him anymore. I found something that's been hurt for a very long time. Something that was given a power it didn't ask for and punished for being what it was made to be. Something that's been waiting for 1,000 years for someone to see it as something other than a weapon. Kakashi was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than Naruto had ever heard it. Sounds familiar. Naruto looked at him, and for a moment, he saw something in his sensei's eye that he had never seen before. Something that looked like understanding. You know, Naruto said. About the shadows. About Kaguya. About what I am. Kakashi's smile was hidden behind his mask, but Naruto could see it in the crinkle of his eye. Your father told me. Before you were born. Before the 9 tails. He told me that he was giving you something that would change the world. Something that would make you a target. Something that would make you a king. He looked up at the sky, at the clouds drifting lazily across the blue. I didn't understand then. I was 12 years old, and I thought I knew everything. I thought power was about strength, about skill, about being the best. It took me a long time to learn that I was wrong. He looked at Naruto, and his eye was serious. Power isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the one who chooses to carry the weight. The one who stands between the darkness and the people who can't fight. The one who keeps going, even when everyone else has given up. That's what your father was. That's what your mother was. And that's what you are, Naruto. Whether you want to be or not. Naruto looked down at his hands. At the shadows that pulled at his feet. At the weight that had been on his shoulders since before he was born. I don't want to be a king, he said. I don't want to carry anything. I just want to protect the people I love. Kakashi's hand landed on his shoulder, light and warm. Then protect them. That's all a king is, Naruto. Someone who protects. Someone who carries the weight so no one else has to. Someone who stands in the darkness so others can live in the light. He squeezed, once, and then stood. Now come on. We have training to do. And if you're going to face a goddess, you're going to need more than shadows and good intentions. The training that followed was unlike anything Naruto had experienced before. Kakashi pushed him harder than he had ever been pushed. Not physically. Naruto's body had been forged in 9 years of training with Igris, and there was little that Kakashi could do to challenge him physically. But mentally. Emotionally. Spiritually. You're carrying too much, Kakashi said, after Naruto had failed for the 10th time to maintain his shadow construct under pressure. You're trying to control everything at once, the shadows, your chakra, your emotions. You need to let go. Let go of what? Naruto's voice was sharp with frustration. Everything. The fear. The anger. The need to be perfect. The need to be strong enough. The need to carry everything alone. Kakashi's eye was steady. You're trying to be a king, Naruto. But a king doesn't carry the kingdom alone. A king trusts his people. His friends. His family. A king lets others carry the weight with him. Naruto's shadows flickered, unstable. I can't let anyone else carry this. Kaguya, she's not something anyone else can fight. She's not something anyone else can understand. She's mine. She's always been mine. Kakashi's expression didn't change. That's what your father thought. About the 9 tails. About the war. About everything he was carrying. And he was wrong. He was so wrong, Naruto. He had people who loved him. People who would have helped him. People who would have stood beside him until the end. But he didn't let them. He chose to carry it alone. And he died. The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Naruto's shadows went still. You think he should have let someone else die for him? You think he should have let the village burn? I think he should have trusted his people. Kakashi's voice was gentle, but there was iron underneath it. I think he should have let us help. I think he should have let us carry the weight with him. Because that's what a village is, Naruto. That's what a family is. Not people who sacrifice themselves for each other. People who sacrifice with each other. He stepped closer, and his hand found Naruto's shoulder again. You have people who love you. Ino. Iruka. Sakura maybe if you let her in. Sasuke if you give him time. Me if you'll have me. You don't have to carry this alone. You never did. Naruto looked at his sensei's hand on his shoulder. At the shadows that were still waiting. At the sky that was turning gold with the setting sun. I'm scared, he said, and his voice was small. I'm scared that if I let people in, they'll get hurt. I'm scared that if I let them carry the weight, it'll crush them. I'm scared that I'll lose them the way my father lost everyone he loved. Kakashi's hand tightened. You will lose people. That's what it means to love. That's what it means to be human. You will lose people, and it will hurt, and you will keep going because that's what it means to carry the weight. But if you carry it alone, you're not protecting anyone. You're just making sure that when you fall, no one is there to catch you. He stepped back, and his hand fell away. Your father was the greatest shinobi I ever knew. He was faster, smarter, stronger than anyone I've ever met. And he died alone, Naruto. He died alone because he thought he had to. Because he thought carrying the weight was his job, and no one else's. He looked at Naruto, and for the first time, Naruto saw tears in his eye. Don't make the same mistake. Please. Don't make the same mistake. That night, Naruto sat in his apartment, his shadows quiet, his parents watching, his mind turning over everything Kakashi had said. He died alone. He died alone because he thought he had to. He had never thought about it that way. His father's sacrifice had always been a story, a beautiful, tragic story about a hero who gave everything to save the village. But it was also a story about a man who had people who loved him, people who would have died for him, people who would have stood beside him until the end. And he hadn't let them. You're thinking about what Kakashi said? Minato's voice was soft, coming from the shadows where he had been watching. Naruto looked at his father. At the ghost who had guided him for 9 years, who had trained him, who had loved him, who had died before he could ever hold his son. Was he right? Naruto asked. Did you die alone because you thought you had to? Minato was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that sounded like regret. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting Kushina. Protecting the village. I thought that if I let anyone else carry the weight, they would die. And I couldn't. I couldn't lose anyone else. Not after everything. He moved to sit beside Naruto, and for a moment, he looked almost solid. Almost real. But I was wrong, Naruto. I was so wrong. I had people who loved me. People who would have stood beside me. People who would have helped me find another way. And I didn't let them. I chose to die because I was afraid of losing anyone else. And in choosing that, I lost everything anyway. He looked at his son, and his eyes were bright with tears that would never fall. You don't have to make the same choice. You have people who love you. People who will stand beside you. People who will help you carry the weight. Let them, Naruto. Please. Let them help you. Because if you carry it alone, you will fall. And when you fall, there will be no one to catch you. Naruto looked at his father. At the ghost who had been with him his whole life. At the hero who had died alone. I don't want to die alone, he said, and his voice was barely a whisper. Minato's arms wrapped around him, and for a moment, Naruto could almost feel them. Almost warm. Almost real. Then don't, his father said. Let people in. Let them love you. Let them carry the weight. Because that's what family is, Naruto. That's what a village is. People who carry the weight together. People who stand together. People who love together. He pulled back, and his smile was the first real smile Naruto had seen on his face in years. You are not alone. You have never been alone. And you never, ever have to be. The next morning, Naruto went to find Ino. She was in the flower shop, as always, her hands moving among the blossoms with a grace that made the ordinary seem beautiful. She looked up when he entered, and her smile was the warmest thing he had seen in days. You're here early, she said. I thought you were training with Kakashi. I was. He stood in the doorway, his shadows quiet, his hands steady. I need to talk to you. About Kaguya. About the shadows. About everything. Ino's hands stilled. She set down the flowers and gave him her full attention. Okay. He told her everything. About the dream. About the scroll. About Kaguya's claim on his power, on his destiny, on his very soul. About the prophecy that said he would become her, would be consumed by her, would make the world whole again in the way she wanted it to be whole. He told her about the throne. About the palace. About Igris and the shadows and the army that was waiting for him to become something he wasn't sure he wanted to be. And he told her about his father. About the choice Minato had made, to die alone, to carry the weight alone, to lose everything because he was afraid of losing anyone else. When he finished, Ino was silent for a long moment. Her face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, but her eyes were steady. That's a lot, she said finally. Naruto laughed. It was weak, shaky, but real. That's an understatement. She stood and crossed the room to stand in front of him. She was shorter than him now. He had grown in the last few months, his body finally catching up to the power inside it, but her presence was as strong as ever. You're not going to become her, Ino said. You're not going to be consumed. You're not going to die alone. Because you have me. You have Kakashi. You have Irika. You have Sasuke and Sakura, even if they don't know it yet. You have people who love you, Naruto. And we're not going to let you carry this alone. She took his hands, and her fingers were cool and steady. You're not your father. You're not the Nine Tails. You're not Kaguya's vessel or the Shadow Monarch or any of the things they want you to be. You're Naruto. You're the boy who sat in an empty classroom and told me the truth when he didn't have to. You're the boy who stood in a training yard and faced a traitor without losing himself. You're the boy who came to me this morning, because he was scared, because he needed someone, because he finally understands that he doesn't have to be alone. She squeezed his hands, and her smile was the brightest thing he had ever seen. And I'm going to be here. For all of it. For the training and the fighting and the war that's coming. I'm going to be here, Naruto. Because you're worth being here for. You've always been worth being here for. Naruto's throat was tight. His eyes were burning. And for the first time in his life, he didn't try to hide it. I don't know what's coming, he said, and his voice cracked on the words. I don't know if I'm strong enough. I don't know if I can protect everyone. I don't know if I can be what everyone needs me to be. Ino pulled him into a hug, her arms tight around his waist, her face pressed against his chest. Then don't be what everyone needs you to be. Be what you need to be. Be Naruto. That's enough. That's always been enough. He wrapped his arms around her and held on. And for the first time in his life, he let himself be held. In the weeks that followed, Naruto trained. He trained with Kakashi, learning to control his shadows under pressure, to wield them with precision, to let them flow through him like water instead of forcing them to obey. He trained with Sasuke, learning to fight alongside someone who understood loss the way he did, who carried a weight that was different but no less heavy. He trained with Sakura, learning to trust, to let someone else watch his back, to be part of something bigger than himself. And at night he trained with Igris. The general pushed him harder than anyone else, harder than Kakashi, harder than his father, harder than anyone had ever pushed him. He taught him to command the shadows, to build armies from darkness, to become something that was not quite human, not quite divine, not quite anything that had a name. But always, always, he reminded Naruto of what mattered. The shadows are yours, Igris would say, his voice steady, his eyes burning. But they are not you. You are not the shadows. You are the one who commands them. You are the one who chooses what they become. You are the one who decides whether they serve or destroy. And Naruto listened. He learned. He grew. But more than that, he let himself be human. He ate ramen with Iruka. He walked through the village with Ino. He trained with his team. He laughed with his friends. He lived the life he had been denied for 9 years. And slowly, slowly, the shadows stopped feeling like a burden. They started feeling like a part of him. Like an extension of his will, his heart, his soul. Like something that had always been waiting for him to accept it, not as a weapon, but as a gift. The night before he was supposed to leave on his first mission outside the village, Naruto sat in the palace with his parents. The hall was quiet. The shadows were still. And for once, there was no weight on his shoulders. I'm ready, he said. Kushina smiled, and her smile was bright. I know. Minato nodded, his eyes proud. You've always been ready. You just needed to believe it. Naruto looked at them, his parents, his ghosts, his anchors, and felt something settle in his chest. Something that had been waiting to settle for 9 years. I'm going to miss you, he said. When I leave. When I'm out there. I'm going to miss you. Kushina's eyes filled with tears. We'll be here. We'll always be here. Every time you close your eyes, every time you need us, we'll be here. Minato stood and crossed the hall to stand in front of his son. He was taller than Naruto now. Naruto had grown, but he would never be as tall as his father. But when Minato put his hands on Naruto's shoulders, they fit the way they always had. You are not your father, Minato said. You are not your mother. You are not the 9 tails or the shadows or the destiny that was written for you. You are Naruto. And that is enough. That has always been enough. He pulled Naruto into a hug, and for a moment, he was almost solid. Almost warm. Almost real. Go, he said. Be what you need to be. Protect what you need to protect. Love what you need to love. And know that we are here. Always. Waiting. Loving you. Naruto closed his eyes and let himself be held. When he opened them, he was in his apartment. The sun was rising. The village was waking. And somewhere in the distance, his team was waiting for him. He stood, and his shadows rose with him. They were quiet, steady, patient. He was ready. The gates of Konoha loomed before him, tall and strong, the walls that had protected his parents' village for generations. Beyond them was the world, a world that was broken, that was waiting, that was full of threats he could not yet understand. But beyond them was also the future. The future he was going to build. The future he was going to protect. The future that was his to shape, his to defend, his to love. Ino was waiting at the gates, her hair bright in the morning sun, her smile warm. You ready? She asked. Naruto looked at her. At the village behind her. At the future ahead of her. I'm ready, he said. He took her hand, and together they walked through the gates. Behind them, the village stood strong. His parents watched from the palace, their eyes bright with pride. The shadows waited at his feet, patient and loyal. And somewhere in the depths of his soul, a throne sat empty, waiting for the day when he would be ready to sit on it. But that day was not today. Today, he was just Naruto. A boy who had been given everything and chosen to be nothing. A boy who carried the weight of the world and found a way to be human. A boy who walked out of his village with his hand in a girl's hand and the sun on his face, and the future stretching before him like a promise. He was Naruto. And that was enough.